for excellent Mike Jackson. That's what they asked me on Facebook, what E stood for.
Yeah, excellent.
They had other choice words, but
Yeah, that's good enough. We'll leave it there if you don't mind.
Eldon Michael Jackson,
Yeah,
my dad.
That's spelled with 2 E's. Not Eldon, it's Elden.
Okay. So you've been a missionary in Mexico for how many years? I was trying to figure that out, and I couldn't.
I headed out of Michigan on my 30th birthday is when I headed down, so that's 38 years ago.
Wow.
Yep.
And then how long were you here? We came back up to the States for a little while.
Yeah, we came up about a year and a half, what I figure, because we was in Colorado and Las Vegas for a little while, and then we came to Houston or San Antonio for 1 year, and then went back down.
Okay, so you've been in Mexico actually ministering for about 36 years or so.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah, more than half my life.
Yeah, so you grew up in Michigan on a farm, right?
Yes, yeah. My dad had got a farm just out of high school. Bought him a John Deere A, which was a big tractor back then. And
because your granddad still farmed with horses, didn't he, for quite a while?
Yeah, they had horses. In fact, my dad used horses on the farm for about 3-4 years when I was a baby. They used it, but at that time they used it to rake hay, to rake peas. When they'd have to cut the peas and then they'd windrow it, and they used horses for maple syrup.
What do they do with the horse and maple syrup?
They pull a little. Sometimes it's a sled, depending on if there's a lot of snow. They pull a sled, and it has barrels on it. And you have to go up to every tree with 2 empty buckets and take off 2 full buckets and switch them and run back to the sled. And with the horse, they wouldn't cut in when get stuck. And also, they would drive themselves. Once they knew the track, you just say, giddy up, and they'd move along to the next and stop. And
the original GPS.
Yeah, it was much better than a tractor to gather maple syrup.
That's interesting. Do you think they still use horses for that?
No. Now they got it all piped. They got pipes running through, going over, and
it all just goes in automatically. Yeah. They don't have to go collect it anymore.
They've changed all that, but no, they had horses. I never saw the horses actually working, but. By the time I got big enough to remember, they were gone, and
everything was tractor by then.
So yeah.
And then when did you start farming? I know you started very young.
Well, Dad would tie me on the seat.
Well, I mean farming your own farm. I don't mean when you were put into forced labor, like is the custom of your family.
Well, we got rid of the animals when I was about 10. Got rid of cows, and so we had a pasture of 7 acres, and it was full of thistles. And so Dad said I could have that. And so he helped me plow it and work it. We got it planted. And then the thistles have a taproot, and your cultivator won't get them out. So he gave me a hoe and a file and says, you got to hoe that 7 acres.
What's the file for?
Sharpen the hoe. I wore out two hoes in that 7 acres.
You hoed 7 acres.
Hoed them all out, and I got $500 out of it back in 1960 or whatever it was. So, yeah.
And you were 10 at that time?
I was 10 or 11, right about then.
And when did you go to school?
Not much. School wasn't an important thing at that. Never has been. It probably shows. Then the next year I had 20 acres because I was actually doing a lot of the tractor farming.
Your dad was working at the car factory, right?
Yeah, at that time he worked at Oldsmobile, building Oldsmobiles. And so he was gone. So to keep the tractor going, we had 160 acres at that time, and then he bought another 80, and that gave us 220 acres tillable, what he had. And then at 15, when I was between my freshman and sophomore year, he was working in construction and got sent to city quite a ways away. He'd leave out early Monday morning and come back Saturday night. And so he rented me the land. I had he furnished the land and the machinery, and I did the labor and the expenses of planting it. And then I went to the neighbor and rented 80 acres of his land, so that gave me 300 acres. And then my Uncle Lee was working same place as my dad, and he had a couple of 100 acres to plant. So I told him that if he'd loan me his tractor, so I had an extra tractor, I would help him get his planted. And so that was I did that for 2 years. Went up.
And you were 15. So is that common at that time?
No, not that much. No, they didn't have.
What did the neighbor think when you came over and asked if you could rent his land?
He said, yeah, okay. so I plowed it and fitted it all up and planted it the neighbor.
How'd you do that first year?
I bought a car, 2-year-old car.
Yeah, I have a similar story like that. I worked at an Italian restaurant.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Basically,
yeah, what
took
was
it
you
all
doing?
over. I'd made pizzas and
Yeah, make pizza. Huh?
A similar story, yeah.
very similar
we were-
situation.
I
He
had
waited on
extra
3
ti-
tables.
Yeah,
And
so I had
I
it-
almost asked for a third one, but I wasn't sure I
yeah,
could handle it.
that's really good. Well, to keep busy through the summer when crops were growing, my cousin and I started working for the two different lumber yards. And the one was building new houses, and so we did his shingling. They'd get a house built, and they'd call us, and we'd go do shingling. Did that all through high school. And so... But before I started that, when Dad was still able to do most of the farming himself, every morning would give me a list of stuff to do before school started, and or before. In the summertime, it wasn't school. He'd give me a list, and I'd get that done as fast as I could, and I'd race over to my granddad's on the bicycle. That's about 2.5 miles, because they were doing fun stuff.
Oh, there's no fun stuff. What's fun stuff?
Pouring concrete, baling hay, and cutting firewood to make maple syrup and heat the house. And we didn't do any of that, so that was. Then I had to be back by 5:30, so that because Dad would be home from work, and then we'd go back out to picking stones and
Doing the non-fun stuff?
non-fun stuff.
So they got a free laborer over there?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I had 2 uncles. One was 2 years older, and another was 4 years, and they were my heroes. They always had something going, some razz at each other, and of course then they picked on me unmercifully. And that was my summer fun. Yeah.
Now your dad got saved when you were first born, right?
I was born in 52, and they got saved in 54.
How did that happen?
I don't know how it was, but they got invited to a revival meeting at the little Sebwell Baptist Church. It's where my father-in-law ended up filling in for a year when I met Susan, met your mother. Same church, and but they were going there. They went there to that revival, and after they had the altar call, and my dad turned to my ma, according to them, and said, "Well, you want to do this? If we do, we're going all the way." And so says, "Yeah." So they went down to the altar and accepted the Lord, and I don't remember not being in church whenever doors were opened, and usually we opened them.
Were they church going before that?
Absolutely not. They were. He was known in high school. Him and his cousin, as the cousins, and they were a pretty wild bunch. Not like today's wild bunch, but they were tearing stuff up a little. And
By those standards,
those standards, he was. They were all hard working. You know, it was the family had to work to get anything done, and farms, and that's why he had 10 kids and put everybody to doing their job. But no, they had no interest in God or in the Lord, and just good, hardworking people.
And was anyone in his family saved?
He was the first one.
And he's he's one of how many kids?
He's the oldest of 10.
Okay.
And
Do you know of anyone further back?
not further back. No, don't know anyone that had any interest.
So he's the first one to get saved in your families, as far as you know.
As far as I know, as far back as I can go.
Wow.
Yeah, and his youngest sister, who is younger than I am, she got saved. His mother got saved probably 15 years later, and his dad got saved when he was 70. And I had an aunt that professed salvation, but no, it was a rarity, and they weren't a rowdy crowd as far as drunks and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't work that hard every day and and deal with.
They would be what you would call the salt of the earth.
Yeah,
But they just weren't saved.
Yeah, they're good people. They wouldn't take a dime that wasn't theirs. They'd help the neighbor and they're actually the ones you have to convince they need salvation.
But they also weren't churchgoers. Were any of them?
No. They'd go to a funeral, they'd go to a wedding, and they wouldn't show up for Easter like a lot of people do.
That's interesting, because when you think of well, that would be what, the 1940s, 1950s. You just have a picture in your head that everybody was going to church. That it was everybody was in church, but you have a whole family like that that's not. Do you know if they knew anyone around them that were churchgoers?
Not that I know of.
Was it like the community thing? There just wasn't a lot of people going to church in the community?
Well, there were churches there, but if you were a dairy farmer, it was tough to put out to find time to do that.
Because you got to milk cows every day.
Milking cows, 3-4 hours every morning and 3 or 4 hours every night, and then you got to do all. In Michigan, you have to put up all the feed for the whole winter, so you're working day and night. You got a couple months in the winter where you got some downtime, and that's about it. It's 5 in the morning till late at night. It's a rough job just to make a living for.
Back then, I don't think people, when they hear about farming and you think of it in today's terms, it doesn't always calculate or compute in people's minds, I think, how hard it was back before real machinery.
Yes.
Even when the tractor first came out, they weren't power, like you say, you could do more with a hoe.
Yeah.
Than you could do with a tractor at that time.
Well, they didn't have the herbicides. That was the big problem. We raising Navy beans, and we could cultivate this between the rows, but going down the row, we couldn't do anything with the weeds, so we pulled it. We had 60 acres every year of Navy beans when I was growing up, and my sisters and Ma and I would walk every row and pull the weeds out of the Navy beans. By the time we got through 60 acres, they were as tall as I was. And we couldn't even lay them down between the rows because it would affect the harvest. They were so big. We'd have to take the tractor and drive down the rows and put the weeds on a platform. Then they come out now. I just come back from Michigan, and they got acres and acres of beans and things, and not a weed in them. They got the sprays that these people want to go to organic.
Yeah.
No chemicals. They're going to starve to death.
Well, it's the ones who aren't going to pick the weeds who want organic.
Yeah, like they're going to go out and pull weeds.
And then they wonder why they're more expensive.
Yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, it's everything's changed. And now they do minimum tillage, which is just much smarter. But you can do minimum tillage because you're not fighting the weeds.
So that was the big issue with plowing, and the whole argument of plowing and stuff was how you're going to keep up with the weeds.
Right. Well, I remember them check rowing, which means they have a cable, they have a wire with a knot in it every 42 inches. and you have that stretched across your field, and it runs through the planter, and every time that knot comes up, it drops the seed. And so you're putting 3 or 4 seeds in a hill, and when you get done, if it's done right, you can cultivate both directions. You can go against the planting and with the planting, so that you can cultivate all the way around it. And it's a big job and I remember doing it. My sister was on one end of the field. These are 1/4 mile long fields. And we had enough cable to go across, enough wire, and we'd have to move that over every
And stake it down, or what did you have to do? You had to stake it down, right?
Yeah, I had to stake it down. Right. You pull it over, and it's quite a trick, because if you let this thing move back and forth, then it doesn't line it up. So
then you lose your advantage you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, or you just cultivate out corn.
Well, that's what I would do. I'd be like, well, I'm not picking weeds, so.
And of course, then you don't get much yield, because you're not having a seed every 7 inches like you try to do now. You got 3 or 4 every 42 inches. So herbicides is one of the biggest things.
So that's what did that really, is that one of the things that really increased the productivity of
Yes,
grain in the field?
Yeah, because you would have a wheat field, you would have weeds growing up in it, and now there's nothing. They've engineered the seed to accept the.
Well, that's the other thing. It's the genetically modified stuff that people are all up in arms about. Yeah. How horrible it is, and it's going to turn us all into mutants.
Yeah, like corn, they got an atrazine, and you can put straight atrazine powder that's supposed to be 1 pound per acre, and you can put it straight onto corn, and it won't touch it. If you put that in a small area, 1 pound of that, you wouldn't grow but corn there for 5 years.
It kills everything.
Everything, but corn and strawberries are resistant. You can put a real light dosage on your strawberries, and it'll kill the weeds and not the strawberries. So my grandma was doing it, and she'd take a couple tablespoons of atrazine and mix it up in a couple gallons of water and spray it lightly on the
strawberries.
And so my ma heard about it, said, I'll do that. So she went out and she took the straight powder and sprinkled it, turned it white. We could grow corn there only for 5 years. There was no strawberries, no nothing.
Killed everything.
Man, that stuff works.
A little bit's good, a lot's better. That's a philosophy of our family.
Yeah, pretty much.
If a little bit's good, a whole lot must be real good.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the big thing. And then so now and of course we had stones. I don't know why I don't see stones like I did when we were growing up. It's pick stones. They'll make mountains of stones.
Y'all picked them all out.
Yeah, right.
Well, we got them down we had the A and a little scratcher we had for a implement, and then I bought a big tractor, or Dad bought a 40-20, and a little bigger, and we scratched deeper and brought them up some more, and then I bought a bigger one with a chisel plow, and we brought up monstrous rocks. So we picked stone. That was our summer job. Besides everything else, was we kept 20 acres. In summer fallow, they call it, because that's how you try to control the weeds. And so
How does that work?
Well, you plow it, and then they start to come up, and you go out and you work the ground and kill them, and you thought that was helping. And you was resting the ground for a year. But that brought stones up, so us kids would go out, and we'd pick the stones off, and then we'd scratch it again and pick up more stones. And 3 or 4 times a year, we'd go over that 20 acres and pick all the stones we could find. And
yeah, I have a stone picking story of my own, you know.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, you dummy, you're not supposed to be underneath the tractor.
I was like 5, and he has me out there picking stones, and they run me over with the tractor.
Yeah. Well, you're supposed to stay in the bucket till you stops.
He has me riding around in a bucket of the tractor.
In front.
With some dummy up there, got Ray Charles driving it. Just ran me right over. I was on crutches for weeks.
It would have killed you, but we was in muck. And the front, and it's so soft, the front tires were below center, but the hub of the tire was actually below the top of the dirt. And that tire was underneath you turning you when I saw you. That was a bad day.
That was the same week as the hatchet.
That
See, they've been trying to get rid of me for a long time. They're like, give him a hatchet, make it real sharp. That'll work. Well, here, run him over with a tractor.
those are the only two stories that haven't been embellished. The rest of them were pretty bad. Those two were actually pretty bad. I apologize.
Well, I got some framing stories that aren't embellished either.
Framing that, no, that's embellished. Believe me, you little whiner.
I got some stories. We're going to talk about some stories here in a minute.
Yeah, what's up?
Anyway, so your dad, he gets saved, and you're just a baby, right?
Yeah.
And then you got saved at what age?
It was May the 5th, 1957, and I was sitting in the second row back on the left-hand side of the little church we was going to, and I went up to the front when they had the altar call, and a guy named George Spees, who just died when I was up there in Michigan this time.
Oh, he died. I didn't know that.
Yeah, just did, and he came up and dealt with me. And that's the thing I remember the furthest back in my life. I was out. I remember being out on the sidewalk, running up and down. I'm saved. I'm saved. I'm saved. So yeah. And it's been. I got some regrets in my life, but not many. The Lord. I call it the glorious salvation. You hear about people that were in all kinds of stuff and terrible, terrible lives and how great their salvation was. But the greatest salvation is being saved young and being saved from going into that rather than being plucked out.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I got some regrets, but not many. When I hear the stories that we've dealt with in Mexico and even here, it was a glorious salvation to be saved at a young age and kept. The Lord was merciful.
And then when you were young, I couldn't find any like CDs or tapes or anything from. But weren't you in a musical group?
Oh yeah, well,
weren't you the lead singer?
I was the lead singer.
You didn't know that, did you? You come from musical royalty.
Yeah, we would go to they had all night hymn sings, and they would bring in the quartets, the Statesmen. In fact, George Speed sang for the Statesmen. He would sing for them as a baritone for the Statesmen. The Blackwood Brothers. They had all these groups would come into a big theater, and they'd sing till 2 a.m. Take turns singing their songs, and then sing together. And I'd be up in the balcony because nobody wanted me down next to them, and I'd be singing along with them. So then. So we put together, it was Ron Shelders, who's now my brother-in-law, Chuck Courtney, and Chuck Schofield, who is my aunt's husband now. And so we had our little quartet. And we had a really good piano player, and she tried to hide our singing.
She played real loud or what?
Yeah, she played loud and just flowery, but I thought we were great. The other three could carry a tune. But they were so bashful and shy. They just kind of whisper, and I'm out front, and I'm putting on being like one of the quartets, putting all the motions in it. I can just imagine I had people crying.
I bet you did. I'm crying right now.
It was
you still got the touch.
When we get started, the people are trying to be so spiritual, the crowd. We'd go to different churches. We went to 7, 8 different churches. They invite us to come in, and they're trying to be so spiritual, and this is so blessing. They start cracking up. The first thing you know, the tears are coming down. And they're laughing and having a big time. Yeah. I was never asked to make a record. I don't know why. But anyway.
Yeah, I couldn't find any recorded evidence of this.
No, there's no recorded evidence. But I tried.
When a lot of those stories that you talk about of the churches up north back then, It's strange because it's not the what it isn't normal today, but it isn't, I don't think, what you expect when you think of Northern Christianity, maybe less if you're from the South. I don't know, maybe, but you like that, like they get together and sing all night. You'd have revivals, you'd say, that last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And your dad talks about going down and chipping a hole in the ice of the lake and baptizing people in the winter.
Yeah, we've done that.
That's just crazy.
There's a lot of little country churches, and they're just. But time I was growing up, the young people were moving out, and it was dying out. Most of the churches were old people. They weren't connecting with the new.
Did that change at all during your youth? Did you?
It was changing, and our young people's group was me, my 2 sisters, and ended up being my brother-in-law, Ron Shelders. And then this couple came in, and they had had 2 daughters that were young people's age, and they put out some effort for us. We went on camping trips and things, and we ended up with 60 people, and 60 young people coming to their young people's meetings. We took over the Sunday night service once a month. And
what would you do there? That's interesting.
Well, we had of course, it was a church of older people, but we had these young people all came in, and so they would pick up the offering. Somebody would lead the singing, and then and I usually did the preaching. I tried to get the others, but they were too bashful, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I preached, they were having a squabble in the board. The board was having a squabble, and they were going at something that I got up and I said, the problem with this church is that some of you are so spiritual, God himself couldn't move you. You're like pillars in the church, and God himself couldn't move you, I told them. Give them a whole big long thing about you guys aren't working together. I just chewed them out. I'm 15 years old. The pastor comes up and says, Mike, maybe we should listen. I don't know. But we just got them all involved, and we went on campouts. To finance that, we would go and shovel snow for people, and they'd pay us for to make our trips. My dad hired us several times to pick stones, and bring out the whole young youth group and a couple tractors and wagons, and we'd pick 160 acres of stones.
Were most kids that helped y'all out pretty hard working? Or
Yeah,
you had trouble with them?
It was a different time then. It was you didn't have iPads, and we didn't even have television. We lived halfway between Lansing and Grand Rapids, and we got snowflakes from both ends.
You didn't pick up the channels from either ways.
We had the antenna on a pipe, and so when we had to go out and keep turning it till okay, you got it. Then when we wanted another channel, we had to turn it a little different, and so it was a different deal. And technology is wonderful, but it's destroyed some other things.
Yeah, I mean, we've lost. Yeah, you lose some things whenever you gain something. There's no way to keep everything.
No, it's a sad deal because we were so healthy. We had stamina. Just different world.
Had the whole day to run over a kid with a tractor.
Yeah, that's right, man. Get out of the way, or we're running you over. Yeah.
I had an eye hatchet instead of an iPad.
I sharpened it too. I remember sharpening it.
Oh yeah, nice and sharp.
I had more confidence that you'd be smarter than you were. But,
no, you're 5. Let's sharpen it then. I thought you were a kid.
Yeah. Well, you were out on the tractor when you drove there. You'd been a lot more if we hadn't come to Mexico. You may have been saved.
Yeah, we moved to Mexico when I was 8, right?
Yeah.
I think I was 8 years old when we moved to Mexico.
So you were driving the A when you were 7, picking stones with my dad.
Never could run those guys over. They were quick little suckers.
I remember he didn't think you could stop the A. He had a hand clutch, and you had to really snap it. So what he'd tell you to head down this field. The field's 3/4 of a mile long, so and nothing. And you would be driving down toward there, and he'd need you to stop. So he'd run up the back of the tractor and stop it. And he started to go up to stop it one time, and you reached up and stopped it. Of course, the tractor stopped, and he's on a dead run. He was able to get up over it, and he's standing on the ground on the other side. Look, I didn't know you could stop that thing. So it made it a lot easier. Then you'd put your foot on the clutch, and you could push it back in. I don't know if you remember doing that.
No.
No? Yeah, you can push
No.
it back in. When I started, Dad would tie me in a seat. I couldn't even reach the clutch. He'd tie me in the seat, and I would drag the field, and I'd go around. And if something happened, I needed to stop. I could reach the gas, and I could kill the tractor, because I was tied in. So I wouldn't fall out. He was gone. He wasn't even in the field.
How old were you?
7, 6 or 7.
You guys would all be in jail today.
Yeah. Well, the neighbors come down and complained.
Yeah. Dirty bums.
So I would go until I'd run out of gas, and I'd untie myself, and then he got home from work. He'd take back 5 gallons and dump it in the tractor, and he'd finish up. So.
It's just wrong. Wrong. Don't I want to ever hear a word of complaint from you.
Well, I never complain.
Oh my goodness, you guys whine all the time how you're mistreated.
Yeah, poor little thing. You have to cut the grass. I had a 20-inch converted rototiller with my lawnmower and we had about 3.5 acres around. We had an orchard, and we mowed all around that and pushed that thing, and it was like pushing the sled, you know. In Michigan, in the summertime, the grass grows like you can't believe.
Yeah, the time I lived up there for a little while with your parents, we mowed every lawn probably twice a week at least. Yeah,
they're just
easy, and not like light mowing like in Texas where you're talking about heavy mowing.
Yeah, well, stuff grows almost 24 hours. The sun comes out at 5 in the morning and sets at 10 or so in the evening. So you got such a long growing season, and
which is why you get good crops up there, right?
That's why you have such. Michigan's got some of the best
Yields.
growing season, but then you've got the spring can hold on long, have too much water too long, and then the freeze can come early, and so you're pinched for time. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
Do you miss farming?
No, I see what they're doing today. It's just far beyond me. Everything's the tractors. You don't even drive them. They're GPS. You don't work the ground. We work the ground so many times, and you look back. I think, man, we turned it to powder, and a little bit of rain, it turns into concrete. Now they don't. They just barely scratch it. Some just minimum tillage, because they can kill all the weeds easier without working the ground. And they get better crops, but it's just so far beyond on me.
A whole different farming's not even the same thing anymore, is it?
No. In fact, the Lake Odessa took out at high school. They took out the FFA. The kids aren't even going. It's just the big corporations. Guy came in and he's got 10 or 15,000 acres, and he's got a planter that does 36 rows at a time.
How big was the planters you used?
We had an 8-row, which was a big planter. We were up to 1,000 acres when after your mother and I married and I went into farming. We had 1,000 acres, but my dad and I together farmed it. I had bought land and he had land. Then we rented land besides, and we were pretty good sized farmers. There was bigger ones around, but
that was a decent sized farming operation
back then.
Was a good sized
operation, but we were terrible farmers.
I can imagine. Very impatient is how I can picture it.
Patience was the problem. My uncle, excellent farmer, we're in the field mudding in the crops, and he's going fishing. And I asked him one day, he says, the fields you can work. He says, well, it's not quite ready. And I said, why do you go fishing? You went fishing. He says, if I stayed home, I'd be in the field, and it's not ready, so I go fishing. And he's off fishing, and we're mudding in the crops, and and
What does that mean, mudding in the crops? Planting them in the mud?
yeah, pretty much. The soil's too wet, and so it's and you work it packs it, and it turns to lumps instead of being, and then the seeds don't germinate good, and yeah, patience is the problem. I always thought patience was a defect, actually.
You know, even the Bible has advice on farming and saying that it's about patience. I don't know if they heard that on the video. We got a thunderstorm, huh?
You lost some video.
Wow,
Are we still live?
that was loud.
Yeah.
I heard it through.
Yeah.
Don't had these things on.
Yeah.
That was really loud.
Are we
We got a
okay?
storm, so we may lose the live signal. If it is, we'll post the recorded. We're recording, right?
Yeah.
The video?
Yes.
All right. So if you lose us, we'll post the video recorded because apparently we have a thunderstorm coming in on us.
Yep.
Although I don't know how thunderstorm affects fiber optic cable as opposed to
Went
everything
black,
else.
but Turn right back on. Nothing.
That lightning hitting
Interesting.
that pole out there might do something.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you're farming, and then you're farming at 15, and then Dale and Nelda moved to Michigan, right? That's a whole different. It's too bad I can't get him on because I'd love to get his story, Dale's
Yeah, well,
story, but
they had met a family from Sunfield, which is where we had ended up at some of our farms. It's just a few miles apart, Lake Odessa and Sunfield. And they'd met them down in Mexico. It's a whole big long story about them getting lost and running into getting their car broke down and walked up to get help at this they thought was a Mexican ranch. And Dale opens the door and says, "Welcome, brother, the Lord sent you." And, Dale, they stayed 6 months. So when they closed the
crazy
orphanage,
Wes.
when they closed the orphanage, Dale decided to go up there. Grand Rapids has a lot of influence in the Christian colleges. They have Christian colleges.
Because of the publishing houses, right?
Publishing house, Zondervan's.
Uh-huh.
And there's several, Grand Rapids is a Christian center with colleges and everything. So they went up there and they get there just as the pastor of the church where my mom and dad got saved. Their pastor had trouble with his family. Father died and had to go back and take care of things in Pennsylvania, whatever. So he filled in so Dale, that's how.
And then they moved in just close to you, right?
Right. Well, after I met Susan, they were still in a house 1 mile and 2 miles away from where I lived. And then, but Rachel, Susan's sister, got to be friends with my little sister, and so they said, "Let's introduce Susan to Mike." So Susan came over to spend the night with Sally, and so it was in the fall, and I had lived for the summer in Muskegon in my little trailer. We was building a project apartments, and
So you were working in construction at the time.
I was 19. I wasn't, but I was helping my dad a little bit, not much. I was building apartments and living in Muskegon.
So you had gotten out of farming, really?
Yeah, I was out of farming.
Why was that?
Well, when he moved back home and I was graduating, I went to build to full-time construction, and he took back the farms since he was going to be there. I helped him some get the crops in, and it was harvest time, and I was just finishing up the project in Muskegon. And so the next weekend after I met Susan, we actually finished that project, and we started working then in Lansing, and so I was back at home. But for the summer, I was Muskegon is on the Lake Michigan in a state park so I'd spend the evenings and playing around in Lake Michigan and Sundays, and we was working 6 days a week framing, so I had my little trailer. So anyway, I was home that weekend because Dad needed some help, and I was fixing this tire. It's a big tire off of a combine. It's 36 inches wide and 6 feet tall.
Yeah, I know those tires.
Yeah, you know them.
I do.
Yeah. They run over you. It would hurt. Anyway.
You can put a lot of air in them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's exactly what he did. Yeah, that's that big dummy. You're 6 years old. We got this compressor system set up with a connection that stays on the tube, so you don't have to hold it to fill up this huge deal. So he's got the little neighbor girl trying to impress her, I think. Anyway, they go in the shop while we're in the field, and we had this tube laying there for this big tire, 36 by 6 feet tire, and this is the tube, and the rubber's over a 1/4 inch thick, and he hooks this thing on and leaves. And so this thing is blowing up, well, it's not blowing up.
It's expanding.
It's expanding and expanding until it blows up. Literally blows up. It breaks windows in the shop. We had little glass jars with all our nuts and bolts, and it busted them. We walked in, my dad and I, that night, and there's this mess everywhere. And we know exactly what he did. And he says, "Mike, get that boy down here. He needs a spanking." So I have a phone there, and I call up, says, "Send Michael down." And so Michael comes running down there, and he opens the door up and looks inside. "We blew it up!" Like he was so proud. My dad started laughing and got in the truck and drove off, and I had to whoop him.
Anyway, so you're changing this tire.
Yeah, I'm changing this tire. So I'm down in the middle of it with my famous green hat on. And
The same green hat.
Same green hat. The very same. I've had since I was 11. Wore daily. I told Susan, "Do not have me choose between this and her. I've had it longer than I've had her." Anyway,
You're changing the tire.
yeah, I'm changing the tire. And my sister walks up, and the first word Susan ever said to me was a lie. She lied to me. Sally said, "This is Susan, and this is Mike," and she does not like to be called Sue. And so I looked up at her with my little debonair grin.
Great.
Would you mind if I call you Sue? And she said, "No, that'd be fine."
Of course you did.
Of course. So that night, after we went on the hayride, and I took her out to get a Tahitian treat, which was her second lie. She said she liked it, and she didn't like Tahitian treats.
Was her third lie when she said she liked you?
Yeah.
She's trying to get out of all three of those lies
Yeah.
ever since.
Ever since. So anyway, when I delivered her to my little sister, who they were slept down in the basement, and I went upstairs, and my other sister said, "How'd it go?" And I says, "She's the one I'm going to marry." And that was it.
So then, how old were you? Yeah, you were 19
I
at
was
the time?
19.
And then you got married at what, like
20.
20?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, that was October of 71, and then they went back to Texas on the 4th of July weekend. Moved back to Texas. That's when she had the wreck. They had the wreck, and I had to go down in Memphis, and I went down there, and she was all cut up, knocked her teeth out, and then a month later from there we got married. She just barely got. She still had the scars and the thing from the wreck.
Yeah, it was a bad wreck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's how you got in. That's how you moved to Texas. None of your family had moved out of Michigan until then, right?
No, I was the bad sheep. I was the first one. We all lived. My dad had 9 brothers and sisters. His dad had 16 brothers and sisters, and his mother, who was a Jackson, by the way.
Yeah, our family tree doesn't fork.
Yeah,
you didn't know that, did you?
Just one branch.
Yeah, it's one branch. It explains a lot.
And she was the oldest of 8. My grandma and grandpa were third cousins, and
That's wonderful.
Hey, you got to go to the family reunion for something.
yeah, that's where you meet the girls. I ain't kidding. I had a third cousin I thought was pretty sweet.
No. We could have gone all day without hearing that.
So anyway, yeah, that was the way that was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she didn't like you moving out of Texas, right?
No,
out of Michigan.
No, but I was framing for this big company, and I don't know. I didn't have my head together. I guess I couldn't take there was drunks, and they were running the crews. My dad was a superintendent over half of the company on one half, doing houses and different things, and then there was another superintendent that was over our half of the company, and he was a drunk. He was supposed to bring us nails, and he never had them. He's supposed to bring us saw blades, and never had them. And then him and his buddy, who was one of the foremen of another crew next to us, they were coming in and stealing our lunches because they never went home. And so I told Susan, we're going to Texas. And we'd already met the local church. We'd been to the local church in Detroit and saw the praise and the open meeting and things. And so we went to Texas because Dale had went there and was in the local church there. That was before those two churches. That was in Houston and Dallas before they got hooked up with Witness Lee. And once they got into Witness Lee, then they started some mind-bending things, I thought. The conferences were, the emphasis was, one was take no thought, just do what you're told. Just follow, and the other was follow the flow. We're all going this way, come along. And of course, they painted it up like it was a good thing. You know, we got the, but you're trusting them. And then the big thing is that we want no natural ability. Yeah, and they're building a building. and so they want carpenters are going to be plumbers and you know, floor guys are going to do the framing, and they got behind on the schedule, and they were having trouble with the bank because they weren't. So then they come to me and wanted me to do the framing and see if I could help speed it along, but there was no natural ability going in there, you know.
So you were doing the singing? Is that what you were doing?
Yeah. They didn't come to that. Why didn't they do that? Man, that'd been right on tune there. So then during that time, we were doing concrete work. Me and Bobby Watts were partners, and we were pouring concrete around the city.
In Houston. You were in Houston.
In Houston.
Well, that had to have been brutal, pouring concrete in Houston.
Yeah, that was tough. I was the lightest I'd ever been. I'd lost so much weight. Framing was less demanding than the concrete.
Yeah, man, that'd be terrible there.
We first went down there to Texas. Susan and I moved down, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And Dale says, well, he didn't have a job, and neither did Paul. He said, well, they got signs up, they're looking for framers. Let's go frame. He couldn't.
Did he? Have any of them ever framed before?
No, they couldn't even drive a nail. So we went over. So we went in there, and I talked to the guy, and he'd give us a building to frame. And it was 16 apartments, 8 on each side with a center party wall. And we had no print or anything, just had lines snapped on the floor. And there was different size studs, which was really strange. And it has to do with the floor system, trying to save $1. They made it very complicated to build. The forklift driver brought us a bundle of studs, and he says, these are for these outside walls. So we built it up, and we just got it all built, ready to stand. And he came up and said, no, I'll give you the wrong ones. It's got to be these shorter ones. So we tore that all apart, cleaned the nails all out of it, put in the shorter studs. This is a wall that's 200 feet long. It's a big wall. We get it all nailed up, and we get it raised up, and I didn't have a drill to drill for this bolt to go through. So we pried it up and set it on top of the bolts down through there, and I tried tapping it down with a sledgehammer to drive it through, and it was taking the studs off the plate off the studs. So I had those guys, we braced it up a little bit, and I got up on top of the wall with a sledgehammer, and I'm driving down
the whole wall.
The whole wall, so I didn't lose it.
Instead of getting a drill.
So we didn't have a drill.
I've worked with people like you.
So we get the outside walls up, we get the center party wall up, and we're doing the party walls going the other direction. And Paul's carrying in studs. Well, the braces we put on were getting in his way. So he's knocking them off, throwing them out in the yard. All of a sudden, here comes this wall, and it's coming right at me, and I managed to turn sideways, and it fell around to me and just tore it to pieces. What? Who took off the braces? They were in my way. Oh, just then, Nelda, my mother-in-law, and Susan drive in. How's it going, guys? Wasn't a good moment. But in the middle of all that, we had break, and we're sitting on a bundle of studs, and we're reading the Bible and what the local church called pray reading, and this nail salesman drives up that sells dual fast nail guns, and he looks over and here's on a construction company a guy sitting with a Bible instead of beer, and he pulls right over and gets out his Bible and says, "Can I join you guys?" And we had a little meeting there. And
that's what happens when you have Dale on your crew.
We got done.
With Dale.
He got done, and he says, "This is really amazing." He says, "Where are you guys working in that building?" He says, "Where's your air equipment?" I said, "Oh, we don't need it. I got my hammer. I can drive nails faster than you can with a nail gun." And he says, "Yeah, but when it gets hot, you're not going to be able to do this." And this was about October.
Oh.
He said, "When it gets hot, you're not going to be able to do that." And I was driving all the nails. Dale and they couldn't drive nails.
Have you ever seen him drive nails?
Probably not at his best. When we built that garage.
But like just drive a bunch at a time.
He did
some
for us. I don't think it was at his best. I think he could have done it. I'm pretty sure he was faster at that. But yeah, he drove 2 hits.
Set it, hit,
and you were getting it halfway in at your set. So I guess it was probably as good as it gets then.
Yeah. If you don't get it in that far, it's pretty hard to finish it off with another one. Yeah. I was timed at 36 and 30 seconds, 3-inch nails.
36 nails in 30 seconds.
Yeah. Set, drive, set, drive, set, drive, set, drive with that hammer.
That's pretty good.
I had a bigger hammer.
That's almost as good as me.
Yeah, almost. I had a bigger,
oh, not these nails. I'm sorry. I hit at least 40 in 30 seconds.
I had a bigger hammer, but you couldn't drive as fast because it takes too much to bring it back up.
Uh-huh.
So if you can set it deeper, then you can do it with 2 hits. And softwood. You get hard yellow pine.
You're doing construction lumber.
Construction lumber, and that was the, yeah. But anyway, so he says, "I want you guys to try the nail guns for your sake." And he dropped off a compressor, 3 or 4 boxes of nails, nail gun hoses. Didn't really know my name, where I lived, didn't have anything. He says, "I'll be back in 3 days, and if you don't like it, I'll take it back." And he showed up. I handed him the money because now Dale could run the nail gun. And then I could cut and lay out and didn't have to drive all the nails.
Right.
It changed everything. They had crews of 10, 12, 14 guys, and we had 4 of us. And we would build a building in 2 days, and they'd take a week. And so it made a lot of difference.
So then you started framing there. And so how did you get back? Because I know you ended up back in Michigan farming.
Well, when we left the local church, we was there 2 years.
Okay.
And you were born in Houston.
Uh-huh.
And when they had just after we got there, they started meeting with Witness Lee, and then started going to conferences where Witness Lee was talking about take no thought, have no opinion, follow the flow, all these things that you don't question anything. You just do what you're told, which is far from the advice Paul gives. we're to know what we believe and why, and we're to question even Paul. As Paul was teaching, they commended the Thessalonians,
the Bereans.
The Bereans.
Yeah.
For
that
question.
for
studying the scriptures.
Yeah, to see if these things were so.
Yeah, they didn't accept what Paul said. How am I going to accept somebody else? So, but by then the farming had completely quit because it was in the 73, 74 time when the economy went down and it was just dead. So we went into concrete, and then the concrete was was getting undesirable. All night long, troweling concrete over and over again, and getting caught in a rainstorm and washing out a whole driveway, and you're starting over the next day, and it was a rough.
Yeah,
It was a rough time. Anyway, the church went to pieces, so we went back to Michigan, and that's when I got into farming.
and then you decided to get into farming big time. Then, right? I mean,
Yeah,
for
that's
your,
when I bought 260 acres and or signed for it. Didn't pay anything. You just back then you could just sign your name, get anything
you wanted,
Get
just
anything
sign your
wanted.
name.
Yep, it
It's
worked.
kind of the same way today.
Yeah,
You don't have to sign anymore. They just send you.
yeah. Here you go.
They'll send you $200,000 of credit cards. And,
Yeah, I bought all the big equipment for working the ground, and Dad had the harvesting and the planting equipment. He had the planter and the combine, and I had the couple big tractors with the plow and the field cultivator and all that.
So how old are you at this time then?
I'm 22. I got married at 20. I'm about 22.
And then have Dale and Nelda already moved to Mexico at this time?
No. It was a couple years later that they went back. They were in Houston quite a while, and Joey and Linda came up. He was 15, I think, and when they were going to go to see Bill in Guatemala.
Uh-huh.
So they were going to go to Guatemala to see Bill, so they brought us, Joey and Linda, and we had them for 6 months or so. He helped us on the farm, and Linda in the kitchen, and Susan traveled all over looking for us. We had farms about 26 miles apart, and at lunchtime, Susan would have to go find us.
Because they couldn't eat a sandwich.
No way. We wanted roast and potatoes and gravy on china. We didn't.
Not even on paper plates. Had to be on real plates.
She was wonderful. She had
Prima donnas. They thought they were the plantation owners. They were also the slaves and the owners.
Yeah.
They never put that together.
When Susan and I got married, I says, we're not going to have a lot of great things, but we're going to eat well. The only thing we're going to get out of this life, we're not going to. So I told her, don't scrunch on the food.
That's funny because that's exactly what I tell my wife.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not gonna eat bologna.
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna do that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna eat sandwiches all the time.
Yeah, that's all we're going to get out of this life. Of course,
Wonderful philosophy.
Of course, a lot of what we ate, we grew. Susan was canning and freezing, and we'd buy a cow between my dad and I, and we'd split it and have it all processed and froze up. So we ate. We were eating out of our own produce.
Right.
Yep. And then, but Dale and Nelda, they went down to. They decided they were going to move to San Luis, and so one winter I'd get done farming, and get it harvested, and we'd go down and frame apartments in the winter, and we got about 6 months, and we took a month and helped them actually move down. And they got down, they'd rented a brand new house that didn't have closets, didn't have kitchen, it might have had doors.
Was that the same house they lived in the entire time, right? They never moved.
Yep. And I took down a whole bunch of scrap plywood, just pieces that I got at a project, and made a kitchen, and we made closets, and made it to where they could live in it. And then the next year I went down between the harvest and starting my framing for another month, and that's when they set up the film operation. And Bill and I put together the system for showing films. So that two times that Lord impressed on me, there's something more to do than farming or building my own life.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that confirmed it to me is that I decided to go to Mexico as a missionary, when I was having the best year on the farming that I'd had. I was harvesting corn, and it was the best year I ever had. And the corn's rolling in. I had to put a wagon on both ends of the field because I couldn't make a full turn down and back without filling up the combine. And I was just thinking about, I can buy the neighbor's farm, and I want to get another tractor, and And
You were counting the money already.
yeah, I had the dust on the combine, and every time a wagon went out, that was 600. That was 400 bushel, and that's another 400, and that's X number of dollars, and that's going to pay off my seed and fertilizer, and now that takes care of the loan for the land and the machinery. I had two loans going all the time, and I finished up that farm, and the Lord just said to me, "So what?" After having the exposure to the ministry, to trying to help other people with no expectation of a return, and it just, so what? So what if I am the biggest farmer in Michigan? You know, well, so what if the biggest framer? What's it going to be? And so I finished that farm, and I'm heading up down the road toward the next place I was going to pick, and Susan met me with dinner. And so I stopped right in the middle of the road. I can put an X on the spot if you'd like to see it, just on Harwood Road, and climbed down, and she come up, and I says, "Well, we're going to Mexico." He says, "Yeah, as soon as we finish, we're going to go see my folks." I says, "No, we're moving. We're going to move to Mexico." At that time, I was just finished framing and the exterior of a house I was building for. Building her a new house with the backyard was against the school where the kids were going to go to school, and she picked out the colors and the siding and the brick, and I had the exterior all done, and I had the plumbing and electrical done, ready to sheetrock it. And so it was a hard thing for her. A lot of people thought that she dragged me to Mexico, and the fact is, I was dragging her. She was leaving the life that she thought she wanted at the time.
Wow.
I got before we, and it wasn't a week, and the guy I went to school with came up and says, "I want to buy that house." And I said, "Okay, it's yours." So I went back and told Susan, "I sold your house," and that really put the nail in the coffin, because now we don't have the house we were building, and two guys wanted to buy the land, and we were out of there. Come the 1st of April, about March. So I had to work there I had to get so far in the house for the guy, and we got the land and stuff sold, and then through the winter, there's a place, Amway, it just started, was getting pretty good size by then, and they were actually neighbors of us.
You remember the Amway story that Laura talked about? With all the stuff in her storehouse, in her house store?
Yeah. Well, Amway, I had an opportunity in high school to get in the ground floor of their pyramid system.
Their scheme? Their pyramid system, or their sales scheme?
Yeah.
We can only put those terms together and come up with something more meaningful.
Well, their sales program was doing well. My teacher of building trades was one of their first salesmen, and he had us over, a bunch of people that he knew, and he invited me, and when I was still in high school, to try to get me to sell Amway for him. So that's how close I am to the beginning of Amway.
Wow.
And they live their factory is just a few miles from where we grew up, and so anyway, they put in a warehouse that they and other big companies would donate things to give to missionaries. So I went down with my pickup with sides and a trailer, and I brought home 3 truckloads of
What was your plan with that, by the way? I never understood that.
Take it to Mexico.
Well, I know. To do what with, though? I mean, what was the
missionaries should have stuff. Have soaps and stuff we all used. We got a whole truck. We got all the diapers we needed for Betsy.
Boy, Betsy.
Whole truckload.
She's still wearing them.
Whole truckload. Whole truckload.
She needs them.
So anyway, I had this stuff piled up. You know, it wasn't a half a truckload, but it was 12 feet or so in that trailer carried to the ceiling. And then I needed to move all this stuff. So I called up Amway and talked to the owner. And I says, I heard you help missionaries. He says, I got to take a big load of stuff down.
Of what you gave me.
What you gave me. And he says, when are you going to move? And I told him, and he says, I'll send my son out with a trailer, and he'll help you get it loaded up, and he'll meet you in Texas if you'll pay the fuel to get it down there. And don't worry about the trip home. I'll get something to bring back to pay the trip back. So I got, and that semi was full. I don't know if you remember.
No.
We loaded up all that Amway stuff, clear to the ceiling, at least 12 feet deep of soaps and, just anything, and other stuff, because there was other companies that donated to this. So anything I thought the missionaries could use, we hauled it out. And then we put in all our furniture, and then I ended up driving my pickup inside the trailer and piled it all up and got the door slammed shut. And then Amway, the owner of Amway's son actually drove it to San Antonio. And we put it in Lyndall's garage, that is his mother and dad's house. We put it in there, and then everybody going down would take what they could. All the missionaries would take down what they could.
Our family has a long history of taking over people's garages.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. We got Steve and Betsy's garage
Yes.
expropriated.
Yeah. Nelda's garage has been taken over by missionaries. My father-in-law built a garage, never got to park a car in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Watch out! It's the garage thieves. They're on their move. Close your garage.
They used to be worried about a squirrel getting in it.
It's terrible. They'll take over the garage.
Well, they should know, because every time we go to someone's house, we go, you got a nice garage there.
So what? Wow.
They come, we're already measuring it.
That's standard, 13 by 20.
I'm already measuring the windows of it. This will work.
Take that garage door off, put a real door.
Albert has we also moved on to shipping. We've expanded our operations. We've moved on to shipping containers. Albert has one. We packed it full of stuff for him.
But it's the Lord's work.
We get over this quarantine thing. Maybe we could use their living room.
It was terrible. And so then you guys moved down to Mexico. What was your plan moving down?
I was going to help them. I was just going to be their handyman. I went down with my tools and just be there to do whatever they wanted to do. And Bill wanted to print, so I went and got printers, and Dale wanted to do movies, so I went and got projectors, and we built the equipment to do all that. And I built kitchens for all the missionaries that went down. The houses in Mexico, they didn't have.
Yeah, they're just back then they were just shells.
Yeah, and of course we wanted to Americanize it, which means plug-ins and electricity in the rooms. And
Back then, I don't know if you knew that, but you'd get in, and if they had a plug in the room, a single plug in a room, that wasn't bad. That was
and it usually was with the switch for the light and then the plug-in.
It ran through the light bulb.
Well, we lived in that ranch town. Mm-hmm. So it was very.
This was houses in the cities. This is everywhere. This is just typical building.
And the house,
out of mud, basically, those houses.
When we got the first house that we had, and Dale and Nelda rented it for us. We got there, and they didn't have a kitchen. It had a little bitty sink inside of a bedroom closet because they could knock a hole in the wall and run the drain out into the garden and out the backyard. And so I had to build a kitchen there, and I built Dale Nelda's. I built one for Joey and Philip, and built.
During all this, are they regretting having you in there in their kitchen, yelling at them, building that kitchen for them? Like, boy, I think we were okay with that one.
Yeah, you big dummy, get out of the way.
I'd be like, no.
Most expensive free kitchen I ever got in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know if the yelling and making me feel so small.
Look, you're no good for nothing. You can't get anything done. I can't believe it. So anyway, that was the idea, to be a help.
Now, did you go to language school at that time?
Yeah,
Because we talked a little bit about Laura about the language school, but I was trying to place when you were there.
Well, the language school was actually originally set up for missionaries. It was Christians that put it together for missionaries. And of course, as they grew and then other people started showing up, and so it was there was not 100% Christians going there to learn the language, but that was the original intent of the thing, and it expanded a little bit. And so I went over and I had a bad time. They had lost their teachers, and so they were having Aunt so-and-so come in, and their system was really good because they had a theme of the day, and you went to 5 classes, and each one was a step in learning. And by the end of the day, you'd been taught it, you'd been shown it, you'd practiced it, and then you'd done some more practice, and then you actually come out and would give an example of what you learned. It was set up like a really, concentrated thing, and they lost that completely. They didn't even know what they were doing, and.
You got there and it all fell apart. Is that what you're telling me? That's what I'm hearing.
I had several teachers laughing, but anyway. So I was there, I guess, a month. I went over 3 or 4 weeks, and we took over the motor home, so I stayed in that, and so finally
it didn't do too well for you there.
No, I learned Spanish in the street. I actually never studied.
Yeah. So, but at the time you weren't really thinking you were going to do any type of a ministry like with the Word. You were there to help people, right? You were there to do the.
Yeah, but I don't study. I don't. If it isn't something I can figure out at the moment, I'm not too good at studying.
Right.
I don't know, and I don't have an ear for it. Even now, I'm saying a word, and Susan says, "No, it's not like that." That's what I said. Said, "No, you're pronouncing it wrong," and I don't hear the difference.
Right.
And then I'm lazy at that. As long as I can get by, I'm not. That never was a real priority, and it shows.
Right.
But
so then, how does that change though, from where you're going from being there to help them build their kitchens and put together their equipment to where you're actually start street preaching and all of that?
Well, while we were in San Luis, the emphasis our ministry had a lot of practical things going on. The film ministry, it's a big job to keep the films cleaned up and the projectors running and all the maintenance and all that.
So that with that, you go out at night and you're there for 3-4 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
And that you can only do that at night.
Right.
Because you're showing the films out in the street, right?
Right.
You had your truck set up with like a.
Yep.
I remember that. You had your truck set up with a screen that you'd put up on the back, and then
And we had the tailgate stayed on, even though it had a camper. I had built it special so I could leave the tailgate on. Usually you take that off. But the tailgate flopped down. You had a preaching stand.
So you had a podium.
You had a podium. You could stand on there to preach, and then you had the post had lights on them, so you could shine lights on the preacher, and plus hold up the screen. And then we had a wind-up thing we took all the cables that needed to go back to the projector and had it in a hose, and we'd take that back and we'd plug in the PA system. We plugged in the electricity.
See, I remember that. I remember you and Bill trying to get those wires in that hose.
Yeah.
You went and found the smallest hose you could find.
No, there was a smaller one. But
they're greasing them. And instead of buying one just slightly bigger.
Yeah, we
wait, so cutting everything so tight, that's not...
That's also a family trait. That's also a family defect.
There is this big roll of this stuff, and I'm not asking to cut it.
This is old history. This is a long time ago.
Yeah. But it's like this all the time.
We haven't learned.
Cut it 6 inches longer than what you think, right?
Yeah.
You're not wasting that much. No. I'm going to cut it right there, because if I slip...
Yeah.
It's very annoying. And then he slips and then takes it out on all of us. No. It's all y'all's fault.
Yeah, it's my disease. Cutting everything too tight.
Yeah. I have it too. Yeah. So anyway, when we moved out of San Luis, Bill changed the whole direction. We're not
Well, I was going to say, I'm sorry, what I was going to say was that you'd be all night showing the films, but
Right.
then in the daytime, it's a lot of maintenance and upkeep.
maintenance, upkeep. There were so many people coming down. There was 7 families at one time, and they all got a house that needed to be Americanized, and so I was busy. That was a busy time for me. But when we moved to San Luis, I was going to tell Bill move from San Luis to Leon. I says, well, I'll get separate the 2 systems and get them set. He says, we're not taking any of that. We're not going to do a ministry that they can't copy us.
By they, you mean the
The
Mexicans.
Mexicans couldn't imitate. You almost had to have a vehicle. You had to have a generator. You had to have a light plant. The projector used $30 bulbs, and we got a little sprinkle one night, and I went through 3 bulbs at $30 a piece, nearly $100 worth of bulbs. And at that time, the economy was between the States and Mexico was so different.
Yes.
They couldn't have. That was a month's wages. Who's going to do that without being supported by the Americans? And so he said, we're going to do a ministry that can be copied. Things are different now. There's people doing that.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, and the prices of all of that has fallen dramatically.
Yes.
And changed. I mean, if you did that, it would be a whole different.
right.
Nothing's the same.
No, you couldn't get any of that in the States.
But I
Or
do
in
think that the
Mexico. You had to
point.
bring it in from the all that had to come from the States. And
Right.
now you can buy it down there.
Yeah, and you can download it. It's worldwide. Like if you want to download a film to show, you can download. You have to go to the States to buy it.
Nope.
You just log in and download
No,
it.
these were
But-
films, big rolls.
Yeah, this was the old type, like celluloid films.
Yeah.
And like the good one that you guys had that everyone liked or that thought it was a good one was the
Flame in the Wind.
Flame in the Wind, and that was an expensive film, wasn't it?
That was more than the projector and the light plant put together.
I thought it was like $1,000 is this
It was
figure I
closer to
remember.
1,500.
$1,500 back in the early '80s.
Yes. Yeah. So
Which would be, we could, if Nolan had a system of looking things up like we keep talking about, he could tell us what that would
Yeah,
be.
we would
yeah, if you were
Yeah.
doing this,
But yeah,
that's there's a lot of money.
there's a lot of money. It's probably $4,000 or $5,000 would be my guess in today's dollars,
Right.
something like that.
And now Delta got a thing here. It might have been a few years ago. The people that sold that want it back. They said that was a rent.
about
They want it back.
They want it back. I don't know if
How
it-
much?
4,500.
What? Right there, see?
Yay.
Don't have to look things up. It's right here.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's around $4,500.
How you like that?
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And they want it back. What are they going to do with it?
Don't ask me.
What are you gonna? I would. If I were them, and they send it back to me, I would charge them for it. Like, what?
What am I gonna? I'm gonna have to pay to have a dumpster brought in.
They want your that big box TV back too?
Yeah.
Because I got one I can send them. Send them one of those. Here, you want this
Yeah.
back?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So anyway, that put an end to.
But see, even today, you're saying how things have changed now, and you know, if we wanted to do that, you could do anyone. A lot of people could do that now, whereas before, very few people in Mexico could, right?
Nobody.
But even then, I still think Bill's point is valid,
Oh,
right? In that it distracts. It's not just about. It was to me, it was always about 2 things. One is whether or not they can imitate what we're doing, and then the other is where do we want our focus to be in the ministry?
Right.
And to me, the second point was the real point, because that's the one that's true. Even if all the prices of all this stuff fall to where there isn't a single person in Mexico who can't buy equipment, do we really want the focus of the gospel to be on equipment?
Right. Right. It's called the
Expectation?
No.
No.
Expectac.
Oh, the spectacle?
Yeah, the spectacle. I'm trying to say it.
Yeah, you're saying espectáculo?
Yeah.
Right. The
spectacular.
spectacle, or the production, the show.
Yeah. Right. It talks about the simplicity of the gospel. And that really takes it away. It works at.
It does. I mean, yeah, and I'm not. I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I have the struggle of if I have a struggle, it is of overcomplicating things.
You think this
No,
this
no,
setup in here with cameras in every angle and special lighting and yeah.
I don't like equipment. Can't
Yeah,
stand it.
I can see that. Uh-huh.
So I mean, it's not that I don't want to sound like I don't want to come across like I'm against doing things with equipment or whatever, but I do get the point.
Yes.
And it seems to me that it needs to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm not the balance. So nobody should be looking at the way I do things and think that certainly shouldn't think that I have a concept in myself that I've hit the mark on this. I know I'm unbalanced to that side. I have a tendency to my work and in everything I do. It's like that was always our struggle when I worked for you, was that you're more of like.
When did you ever work for me?
Oh, I worked for you.
There was no work involved. You was a play baby. Oh, you've sure embellished that one.
The struggle when I worked for you was I would rather spend all day making equipment to save myself 10 minutes than just do it.
Yep.
Whereas you would just say, just get it done. You'd be done by now if you weren't over there building all that junk.
Yeah, that's exactly that. I have taken your role in that and told him.
Nolan.
It drives me crazy. It's just like you would be done. It would be done.
Yeah, but
if
that's
you're
right.
doing things that you would already. I tell him, no, I'm just gonna do it like this. I'll be done. I'll be done here in just a minute. I'll be done in just. Like you're almost done to almost be done.
The example of that is he come over to the bakery and going to show us how to do donuts, and he spent all morning figuring out how to dip donuts, building out in the shop, building wire things. And good grief!
Ask them how many of the things I built they're still using.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still using your.
I made a little not a lathe, a mill, a little mill to put on his. And he mocked me and criticized me. He's still using that.
I just used it a bunch. I made 200 things on it just the other day.
But yeah, I mean,
how old were you, real quick, when you made that?
Well, it was in Querétaro, so Cole was born. So
About 20.
it's when I made all those Bibles.
Oh,
I wanted to make the little slides for the Bibles, and I went and got them priced, and a machine shop was going to charge me a lot of money to make those things.
Yeah.
I made the first one with a file and a router. I clamped down that piece of aluminum. I used a router and used it and cut the aluminum pretty close, and then I took a file and filed that. I still have that one. I filed the actual shape that I wanted out of it. And then I decided I need to get those made, and so I went, and the machine shop was going to charge a lot of money, so I spent a day and made a little one, and then I decided that was too slow, so then I hooked up drills to the thing. So then I was doing it with 2 drills. That's how I was moving it back and forth. That was my CNC. Anyway, yeah. So, but my point is that I understand that I'm on the let's call it the left side of the spectrum on that issue, and I think like Bill's on the right side of the spectrum on the issue on that. And I think that the proper place is probably more towards his side than my side for the gospel. I really do.
To lose the simplicity of it is tragic, but to not keep up with the times is another problem. How are you going to attract any young people if you have to take them back to the 80s?
Well, see, I remember back when we went to a conference at Town East Baptist Church quite a while ago, and they had do those workshops where they have, like, in the morning, instead of just a meeting, they have like 10 workshops going on. At least that's how they used to do it. And they would have different missionaries or pastors teaching these workshops.
Right.
And they had Lindell teach one on newspaper evangelism.
Okay.
Which was his big thing, right?
Yeah.
Was newspaper evangelism. Lindell was in there talking about it. And some guy in there brought up the whole thing of the internet that was just getting started. That had to have been early 90s. Or late 80s, because it was just on the cusp of the internet. It was still bulletin boards, which was prior internet.
Okay.
It was before internet, but right before it. I say before the web, I guess, for the two viewers I have that are,
Savvy.
savvy. They're gonna criticize that. I don't know. I understand the difference. It was before the World Wide Web started. Before you had internet pages, like web pages you could click on. The internet was there. That was there from the late 70s, mid 70s was the internet, where you could like log in, but it was all very hard. It was like typing stuff and bulletin boards. It was very arcane. And then the web came out, where now is what we think of the internet as the World Wide Web, which is these links and clicks, and you can just see it, real easy to use. It was right on the cusp of that. And he was bringing it up and saying, all of this needs to be transitioned to this new technology.
Right.
Is where we need to be going. And Lindell, of course, his was, this is what I do. That sounds great. You should probably look into that. That was his, which I understand. But if we had gotten, I say we as a group, I don't mean necessarily Lindell or whoever, but if we had really noticed that and taken off on that, that probably would have been better for us in some ways.
Yeah.
To get more involved in that, at least some element of it.
Yeah.
To do that and get involved, because we're real late to the game. Like with this, with the YouTube and all of that, we're way late to the game on it.
Yeah. The innovation's a risk, but I don't know. It's just hard to change old habits.
It is hard, and it's hard to balance. It's hard to balance whether you're going to lose focus. When are you losing focus on preaching to and go into a technology? It's hard. And you can think, well, we could just and this is kind of the debate on that, is like, well, will street preaching ever not be possible? And I think there's strong case to be made that it might come to a point where street preaching is, the idea of standing on the street and you're going to preach is just not going to work.
Where are you going to find people there?
Yes.
It's right now going from house into actual colonias, the
neighborhoods,
neighborhoods. There's nobody there.
Well, here right now during pandemic, you can't go walk up to someone's house and knock on the door.
No,
that's not acceptable.
No.
At least not. Maybe it's softening. Maybe people are getting more. But my guess is that this has changed the way people view. They've already didn't like it.
Yeah.
And now.
But even where we're staying now, because we don't live nowhere, we're just stays.
Yeah, we stay places.
Here in the States, you could shout it all you got, nobody's going to even hear you. Mm-hmm. That's just there's a place. Now maybe and you go downtown, and you start shouting, you're going to have them gun after you for the pandemic. And
oh yeah, no, it's the world has changed dramatically in 6 months, and I don't know how long term that change is going to be. If it's a permanent change,
right,
or if we're going to see it shift back and swing the other way a little. I assume it probably will, but what I think we've seen is that it can change instantaneously the whole world,
right?
Not just one city. You used to think, well, maybe in this park it'll change, in this city it'll change. The whole entire world changed in a period of about 2 or 3 weeks.
Right. Just
dramatically changed.
Yes.
And then it's like, well, how long term does this have to be before we realize we're going to have to consider other possibilities?
Yes.
And then we're back to debating, how do we not lose the simplicity and get distracted? And Bill's argument was always that missionaries had a tendency to get really attached to having the stuff.
Right.
It was like a big deal for missionaries to have this stuff. Well, not even a crutch. It was like a pride thing. It was like,
okay,
I have all this stuff. These are all my projectors. These are all my, he would talk about missionaries that would have like a room full of tracts that they wouldn't give out. Basically, it was like that they had them. The fact that they had the stuff, and it's the human desire to own possessions.
Yeah.
And like what Jesus says, your life is not your possessions. You can't put a value on your life based on your possessions. He says that because as humans we have a tendency to think, my life is what I can store up, right? Mm-hmm. What I can fill my barns with. Right. It's not what I can do with it even. It's what I can. It's having all this stuff, and it's why we hoard so many of us. And so, and all of that has to be we got to be very careful. I agree with him completely on that.
Yeah.
That we have to be very, very cautious because it's so easy to get wrapped up where it's not even about what you can do with the stuff you have anymore. It's just having the stuff itself. And then it's what you say, the crutch of it. I can't do anything without this stuff.
Right.
I mean, just like if you look at what I do in construction, I hire these people and they've never done what I do anywhere else. And so the idea that for them to think they're going to go do this work without the tools that I provide, they wouldn't know how to do it.
Right.
Even though you can. I mean, I've put up toilet partitions with, sticks, 2 pieces of 2x4, and I can,
Right.
cut them at angles, make a wedge, and put them up just fine. I can put them up almost as fast with 2 pieces of 2x4. But they would be lost. They'd never be able to figure that out, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think too many missionaries are that way. They get so caught up in this stuff. So to win souls, I mean, to win souls, you have to have a projector and a film, and you have to have a truck and a screen, and you have to have a generator, and you have to have all of this stuff. And if you don't have it, what are you going to do?
Yeah. That's
And
right.
they can't imagine how you could go out and do a work without all this stuff. So that's kind of what Bill did and you guys did when you went to Leon.
Well, Bill didn't go over there and immediately know what to do.
That's true. You guys how long did you spend over there?
It was probably a year before they started preaching in the streets. Well, we moved over and we were there just a few months, and the guys that I'd sold the land to,
The farms.
they couldn't pay. They'd had 2 years of drought, worst drought in Michigan history, I think. My uncles didn't even have a crop. They actually plowed under crops that they couldn't harvest. And so they couldn't pay me, and then I was stuck with the loans that I had, and so
Because you carried the notes.
I carried the notes. So we went back. That's when we went back for that year and a half and tried to do something with it. And while I was gone is when they were talking to people in the street. They were passing out tracts.
They were doing door knocking too, I think, weren't they?
Doing some door knocking. They printed a lot of tracts. They passed out a lot of tracts. They had the Mundial came and
The World Cup.
World Cup, right? And they printed almost 500,000 tracts and got other Christian churches to help pass them out, and so that was their ministry. And when we moved back is when they just moved back is when they started we started the street preaching. So I was there when we started the street preaching, and so that was.
So it took them a while to
that's a
figure
year
out
and a
how to do a work without that stuff.
That's right. And they weren't meeting. They weren't having church meetings all that time. So it was.
Were they having home meetings for themselves, or what were they doing?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I just know that there was the pastors came down and they went out to Hidalgo and had a fast and tried to discuss what they should be doing, and got into big controversy. And
Did they want them to go back to using the equipment and stuff, or
they wanted them to rent a building, get chairs, and do it. Put money into it.
and they didn't want to do that either. It wasn't just they didn't want to do anything, provide anything, right?
Yeah,
that was the
yeah,
stand they
idea
had
was that
taken.
We're not gonna do the ministry that depends on money. We want and so that was the big discussion. And Bill says, I'm not gonna do what they can't do. And so Lyndall finally convinced him, said, but you're not even having meetings. You're not even having church meetings. No, we weren't. And so there, you need to rent a building. Bill says, no, I don't need a building. I can meet in a park. And so that's where the park came out. And we did. We started meeting in the park. Of course, we were in a bad park.
Yeah, you're in a little tiny neighborhood park, like a little
neighborhood park, and it just had a high spot. It had 3 crosses, and it called Los Tres
Parque de la Cruz.
Parque de la Cruz, and so we were sitting there, and of course it was Joe could speak Spanish, and Susan and Bill, and us, you kids could speak better than me. Brent was there, and he couldn't speak very good. He wasn't.
No, yeah, he was like
fluent.
you.
So we was there, all of us gringos, and there was a bunch of us with all the kids having meetings in Spanish, which was kind of ridiculous.
It looked ridiculous.
And we were there 6 months, and not one person came to go to the meeting. We had a few that would walk by and see it, and they'd stick around for a few minutes, but nobody actually came to the meeting. And we were preaching right around that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Bill, I said, Bill, nobody knows where it is. We invite them, they don't know where it is. And we were in the third floor of this apartment building that looked down on the park. Actually, you could see the park from where we were. Knock on the door, and I says, could you tell me where the Jardín de Tres Cruces is? I don't know. Went to the next door. Tres Cruces? There's a Jardín Tres Cruces? I didn't know there was. It's right there. Oh, that's what that is. And so, okay, so we moved over to Parque Hidalgo, which is where the buses all came.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in town that came to downtown would end up there.
And everyone in town knew where that is.
That everybody knew where everybody got off the bus there. It was, and we realized we got to be in a central location.
It would be like having a meeting in Grand Central Station.
Yeah, that's just right. Just what it was. That's where all the buses come to. If you wanted to go across town, you come down there and switch buses.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody knew where it was, and that's where we started having. And it didn't take long then. We started meeting people, and they could come to the meeting, and then we was up to 75, 80 coming to the meetings in a short time. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it took right off then at that point.
Yeah.
It really took off.
Yeah, and we started preaching in the others closer to the park, and it was a lower class of people that were not comfortable with their situation, and they were looking for answers. I think that had a lot to do with it. Where we were was a little more affluent. They had jobs, and they were getting by. But over there, they were people that had just moved in out of the ranches, and they were lost economically. They were lost in their emotions, and so it was great seeing people get saved. And we actually had a colonia Brent and I was at, and we had so many Bible studies that they themselves said, well, we'll just get together and come over. We'll have pozole, and we'll get all the neighbors to come, and you give us a Bible study all together.
Pull that microphone right up, pointed right at you.
Okay.
You can. There you go. There
Okay.
you go. There, he's losing you a little bit.
All right.
There you go.
So anyway, that changed everything, and that's when Leon really started to take off. But
then your ministry changed there, right? I mean, you were no longer.
Yeah. There wasn't nothing I could. We were printing tracts, but
we had kind of you were doing you did print a lot of tracts still at the time, right?
Yeah.
You're still running the printing press.
Yeah, we were running the printing press, and of course we were folding tracts, and we were offering Bible classes, and so we were putting a postcard into each one of the tracts, and that was a big job putting them in. We dip them in a little bit of glue and stick them in, and then we pass them out with those cards. But the post office went crazy with their cost, and we were able to send them. People were able to send us their postcard for almost nothing, and we could send them the courses with the book of John and Romans.
Correspondence courses.
Correspondence courses. They'd send them real inexpensively, and but then they just went crazy, and people wouldn't send them back.
See,
in.
that's a way of ministry or evangelism that has gone away. That was huge in the world. It was big in Mexico when we went there. Milton Martin, I think, was big into that, right?
Big in that, yeah.
And when we started, when you're talking about the postal rates are low, they had a huge correspondence school going pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think they had 7,000 responses from a newspaper evangelism, but they put in right after the earthquake, and they put out a lot of money. San Antonio sent down money to put in all this newspaper evangelism, and it had a big deal going.
Well, they were going to put it in before the earthquake.
They went down.
They were there to do it.
Right.
They weren't doing it for the earthquake. They did it. They were there, and they had just put it in.
They were just going to.
No, they already had.
Oh, they had.
They already had, and they had paid a certain amount. Well, then the circulation doubled that because the earthquake hit. They were there in town.
Okay.
When it hit.
Right.
And then the circulation jumped, and they ended up getting huge amount of response from the extra circulation, people looking for answers, disconsolate at the time, and it just everything hit on that.
Right. Yeah.
I hate to say but for the gospel's sake,
it's fantastic.
it was a huge thing.
It's fantastic.
That was in '84, right? The '84 earthquake.
Right. So anyway, but when we decided to start preaching, we were going to go in two groups. And Brent had been in language school, and he could actually speak a little bit better than that. And so so Brent, Bill and I went first together, and I held his coat, and he started singing a chorus on the guitar, and so
It's interesting how even though we wanted to get away from equipment, how hard that is.
Yeah.
He still would take the guitars, the accordions that would still go there, which now we would say we don't even need to do that. He still had a printing press. You guys were still building the stuffer for a while, trying to stuff those little cards in mechanically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Bill would do that.
But anyway, so I wasn't preaching. I would just hold his stuff, and then, of course, I'd pass out tracts, and I could say, "Vamos a predicar en la calle." I'd give out tracts on my side of the street, and him on his, and then he would preach, and he'd try to talk to people. That was. But in that, we met the first girl that got saved, Blanca.
Your aunt, your aunt-in-law.
My aunt-in-law.
Your wife's aunt.
Yeah, your wife's aunt. And she lived on the other side of town. She'd come across town with a charola, a tray of donuts or something to sell, and put in front of this little doorway. I don't know if it's some relation or what. And she was going to try to sell those donuts there, and Bill preached, and then I went up and tried to talk to her. And she said she wanted a Bible study, and so we went over and had Bible studies, and then she got saved. And just after that, Alberto got saved, which is your father-in-law.
Which is my father-in-law.
Who married the sister of Blanca.
They immediately jumped into being inbred.
Yeah. Them are the first two converts in Leon. And from there, it just went. We ran into a guy named Miguel Tiquet downtown. They were renting a building, and so we had 60 people maybe coming then, and met Miguel Tiquet, and he said his mother was a Christian, and she had Bible studies going, and so he invited us to go over there. Miguel Tiquet was the first one to come to a meeting that we didn't go to his house first. This was a Tuesday, and he shows up Wednesday. The meeting, and everybody else, we'd had to go to their door and have Bible studies with them and coax them to come to the meeting. They didn't.
They wouldn't just come. They didn't
just come. He was the first one, and then the next day we went to his. On Thursday we went to met his mother, and she had been a Catholic, and she found the verse that says thou should not have images, and the second of the commandments, and so she started telling her neighbors, and she had, I think, 6 Bible studies, and all she could teach them was
not having images, idolatry.
And she asked, so Bill and them, they took over those studies, and several of them ended up coming into the church. And she kept all her life. She brought in people into the church. She was the church evangelist. She died a few years ago at about 90, I think, but she was. Most of the church, a lot of the church came from her witness and her
ministry.
Her ministry is amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah. Grandma Tiquet.
So when you started preaching, when you started going with Brent, that's when you started actually street
with
preaching.
Joey.
Oh, with Joey.
Yeah, I was very intimidated to be with Bill because he spoke Spanish, and anyway. But when I went with Joey, I made me a little message on John 14:6. Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, and wrote it out in English. Susan helped me translate it, and I memorized it. And for 6 months, I shouted my little introduction for morning and night, till Bill said, "Mike, I'm getting really tired of this message." He says, "You ought to be the one repeating it."
I would be too, but I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah. When I'd get done with my preaching, the one I was with would hand me a little slip of scrap paper with 4 or 5 words. He says, "Nobody's understanding what those words are." And so I'd go home and practice with Susan to get them right and try to get them right. And so that's
where your Spanish got so much better was when you started building furniture in Leon, and you ended up having Bernardo.
He helped me, yes.
He came over. He worked. You hired him, and he worked for you for a while.
Yeah.
One of the brothers there in the church.
He was helping me with my Spanish and helped me build, and he wanted to learn carpenter work, and so that forced me to speak Spanish. That helped a bunch.
I remember that helping a lot because you were out there, you'd be out there the whole day, basically, except when you guys, and then he would go preaching with you guys too.
Yes, and I was learning it naturally. I wasn't trying to learn. I was trying to build this, but I had to talk to him in Spanish and listen to him. And
he didn't know English.
He didn't know English, and so it made the more natural way that you actually learn a language. And
do you wish you would have done that going down? Had found a way to get immersed like that and learned it from the time you went down?
Well, that's been a way to do it, but there were 7 families around me and when I was going to do something for them or anybody, they would go get it, and I'm just lazy.
Well, even people that want to learn language are if you have the opportunity, you have to be incredibly disciplined or love learning language to put yourself purposefully in the position.
Well, almost immediately, Wendy could speak Spanish. She learned so quick, and so I'd take her with me when I needed to do something, and she could help me. And had Susan, that spoke perfect. You guys, I took you and Wendy down to that little dirt school, and shoved you in the door. Either when anybody could speak Spanish, and I said, learn the language and don't flunk, and you come home. No time speaking Spanish.
Yeah, we learned very, very quickly. I don't even remember.
You had no other choice. It's either...
Exactly.
And so...
There was no opportunity. In school, there was no one who knew English. None of the teachers knew English.
Yeah.
And so you just learn it really fast.
But I never had to even listen, because I turned to Susan, I turned to you guys or to whoever was with me and said, what they say or what do I need to do? And so it was just, I just turned it off, practically speaking. It didn't, but if you're the only one there, and you have to know, then it changes everything, and that's. But I learned Spanish by preaching in the streets. Is what basically I taught that, and then refined it as I had to deal with things. Mm-hmm. Building furniture out for people, I'd have to go talk to them and figure out what to do, and of course that was forced it on me to pay attention and.
That was one of the differences between how you did the ministry, your ministry have done it in Mexico and well, pretty much anyone else I know, including myself, is that you all, from the time we moved to Leon forward, you almost always had some type of a side business going.
Right, yeah. When we first went down, the first 2 years in San Luis, the economies were so different that $300 a month and we lived well. You'd pay the rent, we could go out for tacos and I had insurance. We moved to Leon. By the time we moved to Leon, the economy.
You mean health insurance?
Health insurance and car insurance. Mm-hmm. We moved to Leon, everything changed. The economy changed, and you guys got bigger and more expensive, and so it was getting pretty tough to make it. So at the same time, we started preaching downtown, and we had all that commotion going on, and I'd go down there every night just trembling because it.
Yeah, they were down there pushing and hitting. And it was a huge mob of people that were there every night to hit and kick and scream and push and shove.
Oh yeah, it got to be a fight every night, and
it was right on the edge of mob violence every night.
Yes. And so I wanted something to keep my mind busy, and the first stuff I went and asked Joey had a little old table and dining table, and I says, hey, let's learn how to build a table. So I bought the wood and everything, and we built a table, and then we built 6 chairs, which I think they lasted a week, and then they all fall apart. They weren't very good. Had a good design, but a poor construction. So I rebuilt them with bigger material and used dowels and stuff, and figured out, and that's where I learned to build and then built Brent one, and so then the neighbors saw it, and I started building them, and then I could see I could make an income, and that so it was twofold. there for the income and to have something to do. I wasn't thinking about the fight we're going to have tonight. And then we started having people that said that they wanted to be in the ministry, but they couldn't be because they had a job to do.
They couldn't be full time.
They couldn't be full time like the missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's in some ways this is an extension of the same principle of doing it without equipment. That's been my contention to the point. I mean, like I say, I get the point that they make, and they're like, we're going to do it without equipment. We're going to do it the way they can. Yeah, kinda. Right. I mean, it's better than than many that would go down there, fly down your private plane. Well,
yeah,
right. It's obviously moving in the right direction. But if we really look at it and say, 4 missionary families moved to a city, fully supported by a church in the U.S., living in a nice home, with opportunity to go back to the States anytime they want,
right,
and go to work and make enough money to pay their rent for a year and a month, and then to say we did it the way they could do it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to poo-poo the principle, but I think we oversell it sometimes.
Yes, yes. And they were saying, well, you guys don't have to work. We were trying to get them to come out and have a day a week, come out one night a week and preach. Well, you guys don't have a job. You come out and preach and go home and goof around and.
Well, now that I'm working full time, they have a point. Yeah. They absolutely have a point.
Yeah. So I worked more hours than they did to build things and have a business, and I was still at every preaching nearly. And
you were there. You were there every preaching. I don't remember a single time where you would not go to the preaching because your job, your work you were doing, building something got in the way ever. Yeah. I'm not saying it never happened. Yeah. But I was there, and I don't remember a single time that was ever the case. Yeah. It was always very impressive to me.
Yeah, and so that took away that a lot of
that right towards you. You can move, just turn it right there. You go.
That took a lot of the excuse out of it, and we had more people. Bill also they also would say, well, we can't be to the meeting on time, or because we don't have a car. And at that time, there'd be 80 people in the church in Leon, and there was 4 vehicles, and they belonged to the missionaries. And they were all on buses. And, you can get to the meeting and get there on time because you got a car. So Bill parked his car. Yeah. And he'd take his wife and kids and baby and his guitar and everything, and he's there and just showed that, you can do this. And to me, that was more of a sacrifice than what I did. To have a vehicle that could get you there. We'd go preaching, and I wasn't going to waste the hour over and an hour back on the bus because I could build something in 2 hours. I'd build something in 2 hours, and he'd take the bus over, and I'd drive up, and we'd preach together. He'd go get on the bus, and I'd drive home.
And you guys live real close together.
We lived I could hit his house with a rock. So, that we didn't hear any more of those comments when you could. Well, I can't say that anymore.
Yeah. So, and then not only does it silence those who might be making
an excuse
or not making excuses or being critical, but it also really did give, I think, a tremendous amount of confidence to people who honestly thought, how am I going to do this?
Right.
I mean, if you see somebody do something with a certain piece of equipment, whether it be at work or whatever, and you just think, well, how could I ever do that? I don't have that equipment, and I can't afford the equipment, or, how am I ever going to go to this faraway place? I don't have a car to get me there. And then if somebody says, no, look, you can do it. Let me show you how. Uh-huh. Even if I have the equipment, I'm going to put it aside. I'm going to show you can do this with a piece of string and a rock. And that's what, a lot of us learned this in Mexico because they're incredibly ingenious at getting stuff fixed with a piece of rock and a string and a piece of wood or whatever. They can jury rig stuff together with very little. And living down there has made me, in a way, it's kind of hurt me too. It has, because when I first moved here, I had this mentality, the missionary mentality and the Mexico mentality. Uh-huh. And so I had a van breakdown one of my work vans, and I'm there with a trailer, and I'm paying all my crew to help me, and we're there for 2 hours trying to shove it up because it won't run, trying to shove it up on top of this flatbed trailer. I have towing on my insurance. They would have towed it for free. But I just don't think that way. I think I got to do this myself. I can't call anybody. I don't have the money to have anyone come do this.
Yeah.
It's just in my mind all the time to do that. It's just I have to constantly remind myself to not do what I can pay someone else to do unless they charge more than I would want to get paid an hour.
Right.
Which is an advice I picked up from some podcast I heard, that you need to put a rate on your hourly time,
Right.
and you should not do anything that you can pay someone to do it cheaper than your hourly rate you put on there.
Well, that only works if you're actually going to use that hour to create that income.
That's his view. No, that doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I'm sure it doesn't work that way.
If you're going to go sit down and eat Cheetos,
I want to watch him do it. That's part of the enjoyment. But I still have that problem that I want to, I want to do it myself, and I'm actually losing money by doing it.
Yeah, I have to fight that. But usually I can do it better than they could anyway, and especially in Mexico, I have more tools than they do.
That is a problem.
If I'm going to hire them, I'd have to loan them the tools, which they'd probably steal or break. So no, I'll do it myself.
I understand. Believe me, I understand. When Nolan comes and helps me.
Oh my goodness.
Why? I was setting you up. I was putting a softball out there for you, lobbing it up there, and you got to go and be ugly to me. Because you're always complaining that when you come over to help, I always take away all the work. And
So I love doing car work with him, especially when I don't want to do it. So I bring my car over, tell him, this is what's going on. He goes, okay, yeah. So I just said, tell me what I need to do. I'll do it, right? I don't mind doing it.
Yeah.
And I already know how he is, right? He goes, so then I just kind of step away. He goes, what you need to do, and he goes over there. He goes, you want to take this off.
Right.
Takes it off. And then what you want to do is you want to do this, and you want to take this off. And he takes that off. And then you want to take this off, and then he takes that off. And then when you're all done, you want to put it on. So then he grabs a new part, and you want to put it on like this. And then when you're done, you got to make sure you put this back on, you put this back on, you put this on, and then you close your hood. Right? And I'm going, yeah. I'm like, just let him do it. And I already know he's always going to do it. Just whatever. Let him do it.
He knows you'd screw it up. You'd mess it up. What can you say?
He can't help himself. It's in him. And I'm okay with it. I don't want him to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and you did that for a long time. You had you were building cabinets and tables and chairs, and did it in Aguascalientes, and then when you got to San Luis, eventually
in August we built a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff.
Built a lot of kitchens. Once they saw the one I built, Susan, and then the neighbor, and then it just really.
It was every day. It was all day. You were up at what, 4 a.m?
Yeah, because we were working from 8 till 4 building houses.
That's right. They built the 2 houses out of rock, out of bricks, on his off time.
Yeah. So
that was his day job.
Yeah, we didn't preach in the morning when we was building the houses, and so I'd get up real early. Poor Brent lived right next door. And
they shared walls.
The saws and everything going, and I'd get stuff built up, and Susan would fill the holes, set the nails, fill the holes, and sand everything while I went and helped build the houses. And then we'd come back. If I might have a little time when we got back, but then we'd go preaching at night, have Bible studies. And that was a pretty rough year and a half. It was about a little over a year, I think, we built the 2 houses, and I probably built 30 kitchens.
So what do you think on the balance of that? If you could go back and move to Mexico for the first time again, would you change that?
What part of it?
I don't know, any of it. I mean, I would think that if I were talking to you and you were saying, I want to move to Mexico, I think I would tell you, move down there alone for 6 months and go live in a Mexican house with a guy, a brother, and force yourself to learn Spanish.
Yeah, that'd probably be the way to do it. The problem is, if I don't see a immediate benefit, I'm not that interested.
Well, eating is a good benefit.
So I would be building something.
Well, that would be all fine. I mean, I'm just saying.
To learn the language is hard because I didn't see immediate benefit. I just, I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. It's just not. I need to see something at the end of the day, and you learn in the language.
No, yeah, you don't
it's
see
slow.
much for a while, and then all of a sudden it's like a huge gain very quickly. I remember that when we moved down, I was like didn't know anything. I was frustrated, and all of a sudden, boom! All of a sudden, you're understanding. You hear what people are saying; they're making sense. It's just real weird. It's real quick.
Yeah. I felt like Anna learned hers like overnight almost.
Yeah,
She went from not speaking to
it was weird.
speaking.
She wouldn't speak at all in English, and all of a sudden one day she's speaking great English.
That's amazing.
It's like, where do you come from? It's like all of a sudden a switch flipped in her head, and she's speaking English and laughing at English jokes, which is a big thing, right? If you can get the humor
Yes.
in a language,
Yeah, because a lot of times it's a play on words. It's not ordinary
Yeah.
language.
yeah, humor is a little harder, and so yeah, it was like real fast.
Yeah.
But what about the working? Do you?
No,
that.
I definitely would have worked. I don't know what missionaries do. It's like, if they have a 2-hour ministry in the morning and 3-hour in the afternoon and evening,
Yeah, well, that's been my struggle recently. Is not with, and I don't want this to come across that I'm judging missionaries or anyone else. I'm just looking at my own ministry, and I think I wasted so much time, just ridiculous amounts of time, and I regret that a lot. I would definitely do things differently. I wouldn't. I don't think I would try your route, but I don't know what I would do.
well, I just would find it hard to spend 10 hours a day trying to talk to people
Yeah,
about the Lord.
Yeah.
But, especially you preach and you talk to people that are interested. You have Bible studies at night. There's 10, 12 hours of that right straight through would be pretty.
I've put a lot of thought
exhausting.
into it because we've considered moving back to Mexico at some point as being an option.
Right.
We don't have any plans, but we have considered that as an option of going back because I would like to try to do a work there differently, not as a judgment on anything that's been done.
Right.
Not to say that I'm not, that I'm at all
Right.
judging what's been done or that it's maybe the best way to do it. I just really would like to try to do a work in a different way,
Right.
completely different, and make better use of my time throughout the day than I
Right.
did. And I'm to the point now where I can't street preach.
Right.
I lose my voice almost immediately. Even at church, we have to amplify now. I have a speaker and
Yeah.
a thing, and
Yeah,
if
I
I
know.
don't amplify it, I'll be hoarse by the end of a 40-minute sermon.
Right.
And so I'm at a point there where unless I'm going to use sound equipment and do it that way, street preaching is just as a no-go for me now.
Right. Yeah.
And so even if I thought it was the very best way to evangelize, which I'm not convinced of that at all. Not that I think it's bad or wrong. I'm just not convinced it's the best way or it's the only way for certain. I'm not convinced of. But even if I were, if you can't do it, you can't do it.
Right.
Right. And so, and I've seen other people. I mean, there were other people in the churches who got to that point where they would, lose their voice. I went and had to go to a voice doctor. I had lesions on my vocal cords. I was put on.
Really?
Yeah, I was put on vocal rest for over a month, and
Didn't know that.
yeah, and so I have to be. I should be very, very careful with
Sure.
it. And so if you're in that position, even if you say, well, street preaching is the best way of evangelizing, there's no better way. Even if you think that, there are going to be people in the position that are physically incapable,
Right.
or even mentally incapable, perhaps, of doing it. And so then what are they going to do? And so that's kind of my thinking. So
Right.
I don't know.
Well, you're more of a teacher, which is than the shouting in the street or the even.
That was always my difficulty when I was street preaching, was that repeating the same thing over and over and over again, essentially, is very difficult for me.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not something I enjoy. Put it that way.
Well, I get comfortable in the same thing over and over again.
Oh, I know.
Because that means I don't have to work it.
How long have you had the hat?
This hat? This hat here? 57 years.
Just a little comfortable with the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a little comfort.
I'm getting more and more protective. I'm afraid someday it's going to break, and
I bet you are.
I'm being very, very careful. I don't let anybody touch it.
Surprised he doesn't have like a little padded box he hauls it around in.
I've thought about it. I pack it very carefully. It's been stolen and painted blue, and I got it back. My mother-in-law washed it one time. Boy, that was a no-no.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. A lot of thoughts come out from underneath there. Yep. Some of them not so good.
So anyways, after you moved out of Aguascalientes, we went to San Luis Potosí. We started that church there, and you started the bakery.
Yes.
And that was quite an experience for
that
quite a
was
while.
a big deal. I built the kitchen and built a kitchen for another lady, and people started showing up, and they wanted big tables with the legs looking like the paws of a lion, and
which is not at all the type of.
Yeah, and I says, if it don't go through my saw straight, I don't do it. It just, and so Susan made a couple pies, and the first thing you know, we're big time bakery. She went down to get it. She made 2 pies and gave it to a restaurant, and they wanted to buy the pies. They wanted to buy pies, but we had to be registered to sell it to them. Other restaurants didn't care, but they wanted to be able to deduct it. Mm-hmm. So I was finishing up the last kitchen that I had promised in Aguascalientes, and they were in San Luis. And I told Susan, we'll go down and just ask them what you have to do to get registered, what's involved. So she went down with Marco, who was not a son-in-law yet. And so they went in there and told the young girl that they was wondering what it is to be registered. So, well, what's your name? And said, Susan Jackson. Oh, you're American. Is he a Mexican? Yeah, he's 18. Yeah, he's over 18, and his name is Chaides. Okay, Chaides Reposteria. So here you go, you're registered. And so they called me and said, yeah, we're registered. And I said, don't do that. You don't know. You got to have accountants and all this. So I says, make me 12 pies, and I made 2 boxes of curry pies, which are heavier than the 12 pies.
I remember.
Yeah, it was not a good deal.
Let's get some 3/4-inch plywood.
No, it was 3/4 boards. It was not the cheapy plywood. It was
1x4s. He made boxes to put pies in.
You couldn't lift them. So I got home, and I couldn't hardly speak Spanish. So I took Wendy to help translate. She was, 12, maybe 13, I don't know. Anyway, we walked down the whole length of Carranza, and I tried to give away those pies to try. And I only could give away 1. When I pulled the pie out, and some of them had cherries and some had blueberries on them, they paid me for them. We sold 11 of the 12 I was trying to give away. So I come home with a profit the first day, and I went back the next day to pick up the pie plates, and asked them if they wanted to see if they wanted something else. Yeah, bring me 2, bring me this, bring me that, bring me a chocolate pastel tres leches. I said, sure. I got home and I said, Susan, what's a pastel tres leches? We didn't know. She didn't know. We went to the neighbor and she told us how to make it. And of course, we use American ingredients. And instead of the sweet sugar icing, she went and found what they call
whipped
cream that they used on other things. Nobody was icing with that, and she iced it with that. And in a month and a half, we had 15 restaurants, hotels that we were delivering cakes and pies to for 2 years, until Gortati left office with all the money and had the big everything devaluation. The restaurants quit buying from outside. They quit buying from us. So we was out of business in one day. And so then the question was, well, we just shut down, and it was taking time from us, from the ministry. But at that same time, both 2 of our girls needed to have teeth work done, and it would have taken to do that teeth work they needed. It would have taken 6 months of our offerings to do both of them, and I was going to have health insurance for my family, and I was going to have a car insurance. So I says, we got to do something. I'm not going to live without taking care of my family. So we got a refrigerator with what they call a vitrina with the seat to display the cakes, and we took the little patio, which it was twice as big as your bedroom.
Yeah, no, it was probably about 3 times as big as my bedroom.
Maybe it was. And we
The
opened.
cakes got a bigger room than I got.
Yeah, well, they were worth something. So anyway, we opened to the public, and we didn't know, but in that 2 years, people were eating our cakes at these restaurants and knew that they were from Chitus. And so we opened up on the 1st of May with a little bitty thing in the paper that said Chitus is open to the public. And by the 10th of May, on the 10th of May, we sold 300 cakes. And the next year, we had a line out the door waiting for cakes on Mother's Day, and it just exploded. We had people begging for franchises all over Mexico. We could have done big things if I had more of a business mind in that I could get the things built, but I didn't have the expertise in the finance.
And moving it past that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we would have had no ministry time. As it was, it got difficult. I went preaching in the evenings. There was a couple of times we had a semi came on Wednesday afternoon, and I had to unload, and I missed a couple meetings on Wednesday night because a semi came. One time I didn't unload, and they had stolen 10 bags of cake mix out of in transport, and because I wasn't there when it was unloading, I didn't catch it, and I ended up couldn't. I tried to get the transport company to pay me back for that, and because I wasn't there, I lost 10 bags of. Anyway, it went from me running to the States and getting boxes of cake mix to bringing down semi-loads of 50-pound bags from the factory buying direct from Pillsbury.
You're driving direct from Pillsbury, weren't you?
Yeah. It wasn't very long, and we figured we was up to 1 million cakes that we had made, and that was before we put in the big bakery.
Wow.
It was crazy, and people came down twice. One year, and then the next year came down for a wedding from Chicago and tried and had our cakes at the wedding, and came over and they wanted 3 cakes. Each of them wanted to take 3 cakes back to Chicago. We sold.
Yeah, I remember people would know you at the border. You had people who knew about your bakery from all over the place. You run into people.
We sold wedding cakes from Mexico City to Monterey, from the Pacific to the Gulf. People would try them at some other wedding, and then they would figure out a way to get them back to Tampico or to Tampico. And
you hit that market just at the right time, because it was when they had disposable income, where average people could go and buy a cake, not just on a special day.
Right.
And you had more of that,
Yep.
and then and there wasn't any competition for quality pastries at the time.
And Susan innovated so many things. Nobody was using like what we call chantilly, the whipping cream for icing. It was that sweet sugar icing, and we never iced her that, and it just is fantastic. And we had the American flour, which made a cake that would be fluffy and firm, and yet we could pour the 3 milks into it, and it wouldn't dissolve. The three milks cakes that the Mexicans would make would turn into mush. You had to use a spoon, literally use a spoon to eat the cake.
Cake soup.
Cake soup, just what it was.
Here's your water right there.
Just exactly what it was. And then we got ready for the first wedding cake, and we said, we don't know how to ice a wedding cake. We can't make those little sugar flowers and all that stuff. We want the bread. It don't even have to be iced. It was the bread that was the point. But she disappeared after we got the cake all put together and had chantilly on it. And she came back from the market with this big bunch of flowers, and we just stuck flowers in the cake. Beautiful. Nobody ices any other way now. Do their wedding cakes and all our natural flowers. It was her invention on that. And nobody had ever made a chocolate tres leches. There's no such thing as... No, I argued with people. I said, no, it's a chocolate tres. No, tres leches are vanilla. No, this is chocolate. You just put the milk in the chocolate. And that's even better than the vanilla. And then she put fruit in it. We put peaches and pineapple and strawberry. Strawberry's the biggest one. And nobody was doing that. And now that's the common thing. We created a whole product.
One of the things also that that hurt, I think, wasn't just the not taking it, not wanting or willing to, or having the or being able to take advantage of the opportunities that you mentioned, but also Mexico's an incredibly terrible place to do business. And I don't know that you factored that in at the start.
Pretty bad.
One of the worst in the world.
They are considered the third most corrupt nation to deal with.
But even without the corruption, let's set aside the corruption. If they did everything by the book,
their book,
yeah,
their book
it would be terrible.
Their book is anti-business,
yeah.
Anti-business.
It's anti-business, anti-employer, anti-employment.
Yeah. If you're starting a business, you're the bad guy.
All of that just makes it.
The fact that you're doing the investment and doing all the risk, and you're hiring everybody, and you're paying them, and you're giving them insurance, and you're still the bad guy. And,
yeah.
No,
it's where many people want our country to head to.
That's right.
And they should go down to Mexico and see the effects
Yep.
of this, because they have unfettered. They have unfettered rule on this. These things have been put into place. These policies that people in this country want to put into place.
That's right.
They have put them into place.
Yep.
Gangbangers.
Right.
They've put it into place completely without
Yep.
any restraints at the most idealistic way possible.
Right.
And if you want to see what the result of that is,
Right.
you can go to Mexico and see what that result
Well,
is.
any of the businesses, and I got to know quite a few business people. They seemed to come to deal with me, and they couldn't believe that we were doing our business legally, and as long as our family was doing the work, as long as our family was making it happen, we could make money. But as soon as we hired people, and we lost that advantage of, we had to give out the proceeds to employees, we couldn't make it. The tax laws, the labor laws, and so these other guys I talked to, they says you gotta run two books. You gotta show much less income and a whole lot more expenses, and you just got to cheat the government because they're not going to let you make a profit. And
that's absolutely the way it is, and people should go see what that is. And that's just a product of these ideas. This ideology, that's what it's going to result in. It results in it that every time. Mexico is a tremendous example of a capitalistic nation run by socialistic ideas on how labor and how labor and management should coexist.
Right.
And when you have that balance,
Right.
you're going to have not only labor can't make it.
Right.
Management can't make it. Labor can't make
Right.
it.
Right.
The company doesn't make any money, and the employees don't make any money.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They're getting paid, $5 a day or $10 a day, whatever minimum wage is in Mexico right now,
Right. Mm-hmm.
which is low for Mexico.
Right now,
Mexico's standards are, their economies are much more compatible. And so nobody's making money.
Nope.
You wonder where a lot of it's lost in bureaucracy.
Right.
A lot of it. Tremendous amount of waste.
Yeah.
Even when we don't factor in the corruption.
Right. Yeah. If it's somebody really prospering in having a lot of things, they're either political or they're into drugs and the cartels.
They're in the black market.
They're in the black market, or they're just honest people. Just haven't got a chance. Even if they can't compete with the others that are doing it the other way. It just
it's a horrible system, and it's not an anomaly. It is what happens when you implement these stupid ideas that people want to implement now here, and they think they're going to fix it. They think they're going to make wages better by raising minimum wage.
And
it's just ridiculous.
And you can't fire anybody.
If raising minimum wage could fix it, then why don't we set minimum wage at $1 million a day?
Yeah.
I mean, why would you want people to work for less than $1 million? What kind of heartless person are you that you don't want them to have $1 million a day? I want them to have $1 million a day. Yeah. I want you get $1 million and you get $1 million and you get $1 million. We all get $1 million. Let's just set it up. I mean, if that's the solution, why are we plinking around with $15 an hour?
Right.
Let's just shoot for the top. Why? Let's quit messing around.
Right.
Apparently, it has no effect on anything.
No.
So let's just set it up there.
Oh, yeah.
Higher the better.
Yep. Well,
Dumb.
But the protection of the employee makes it so that you can't pay them very much.
Of course.
Yeah, you can't
Protection
fire 'em.
costs money. Ask the mafia.
And if you have to fire them because they're absolutely hurting you, you end up having to pay them according to what you've a bonus for
Based on what you've paid them for all the time.
So you keep them as low as possible.
They make minimum wage forever.
Yeah. And you can't trust anybody. You say, well, he's really been a good employee, and you.
Well, no, because they're getting paid minimum wage forever, so they feel they're owed, and so even if they're not inherently dishonest, or or I should say inherently corrupt, let's say, you get to feeling like you're being abused because you're never getting a wage. You're not getting any part of the profit that you feel the business is making.
Yeah.
So you're disgruntled. Everyone's a disgruntled employee in Mexico. And so then you're like, well, we just got to get it for where we can get it. And so then you're stealing.
Yep.
It's how this snowballs down the hill
It gets
from
bigger
these
and bigger.
stupid idealistic views, instead of just letting people reach arrangements between themselves however they want,
Right.
and getting bureaucracy out of the way.
Yep.
Just people think they're going to fix it. They think they're going to fix all this. They're going to push laws.
Right.
They're going to fix things, which I think is great. I mean, since that works, we should pass a law that you shouldn't kill people, and then that would fix all the murder.
Take right care, and you shouldn't use your gun to do it.
That's right. If you could just have those laws, then that would fix everything, apparently, because you could just fix things with law.
Yeah.
If we just had laws that fix everything, it's just it's ridiculous.
Yep. I agree, 100%.
Well, that got me off on a rant.
Yeah, there you go. You're ramping and raving, you guy.
Well, I just think that people I think this is an important point, both for business owners, for employees who don't understand how the economy works. They don't understand how finances work. They don't understand how business works because they've never actually run a business. And they don't understand how socialism works because they've never lived in it.
Yeah.
I've lived in a socialistic, capitalistic, hybrid country. Mexico is a great example of capitalism and socialism trying to mingle.
Right.
Right? And all that does is make socialism not quite as bad as it could be.
Right.
But it doesn't help capitalism.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the capitalism has helped. They've learned how to take advantage of the other countries. NAFTA made Mexico what it is today. It's amazing how much money came in, and how everybody has cars, couple of cars, and they've all got houses. When we first went down there, you didn't see new housing projects. It was, you get married, you live with mom and dad, who's still living with grandma and grandpa, and now it's entirely different. And of course, everybody's in debt. And that's how you make a middle class, is you teach them how to live in debt. And living in debt means you're paying interest to the people that had it in the beginning. And so, it's...
Yeah, I think. See, I'm probably one of the in the minority, but I'm a very adamant free trade proponent of the vein of Milton Friedman, and so to me, NAFTA was a win-win. Now, I think that there were elements of it that were not truly free trade, and they didn't benefit one side or the other. But I think that free trade benefits everybody.
I think free trade if it's balanced and fair.
Right. But I think that
like Canada and the NAFTA, they got to where they could bring their milk products and their big dairy producers into the United States with zero tariffs. To send milk products to Canada was 280% tariff.
Yeah, but see, here's the deal with that. Who does that hurt exactly? You can say, well, it's hurting our milk farmers because they can't sell to Canada.
Okay.
But we're getting milk the rest of the country, which is 99.99% of the country, can now buy milk at a cheaper price.
So that means that we're going to sacrifice our dairy farmers. But
If they can't produce dairy,
they can produce more dairy.
if they can't produce dairy at a price that is more competitive than Canada at zero tariffs here, then yeah.
Well, they're already at 280%. 280. If you send $1 worth up there, they're going to sell it for. They have to get 280.
Yeah,
cover it.
but that's selling to Canada. They can sell here in the U.S., and they should be able to compete with Canadian dairy farmers, even without tariffs.
But you're in the world economy now.
Right, which means we get to then offload things that we cannot produce as efficiently for whatever reason. If there were no tariffs on anything, then anything that the U.S. cannot make and sell here because of labor costs, because of bureaucracies, because of regulations, health inspections, all of the things we've stacked on the dairy farmers, right? That means we can't produce dairy at the same cost that another country can
That's
do
right.
it for.
That's right.
And they can actually ship it to us cheaper than we can produce it.
That's right.
Then why are we producing it? That's my view.
Yeah.
My view is,
Okay, so
let's
what's the-
offload iPhones. You know how much an iPhone would cost? Would you have an iPhone today if we had to make them here?
Probably not.
No, they've done the thing. They would cost like $7,000 for a phone if you made it here today.
Wow.
Outrageously expensive. So what has benefited us?
Okay, but I understand all that. But what happens to the people that used to make them that can't make them anymore because you can't compete, and they can't compete because of X number of things, which includes unions, which includes the bureaucracy and all their regulations, and the other places that you're competing with don't have that. The only guy that gets hurt is the guy that's trying to make a living.
Only in theory, right? And there are always going to be some of those, but they're in the same line as the typewriter manufacturers and the the saddle and bridle manufacturers and the horseshoes and the old blacksmith hammering a horseshoe out on an anvil. I mean, government is trying to maintain these people. I say people, these trades, these professions. These aren't people. These are professions.
Right.
The people are fluid. Even when horseshoe blacksmiths were hammering them on, it was not the same person doing it every day. That guy moved on at some point and did something else. He died or got a different job or bought a grocery store.
All of your examples are things that are paso de modo.
But why do they do that?
But they still need milk and they still need steel.
Well, maybe, maybe not.
Well, why are they still buying it from other places?
Because the need for it has become so commoditized, and replacements are available that they're not willing to pay these higher prices. And the only way they're going to, it's like if everyone starts having electric cars, and let's say 50% of cars are electric,
Okay.
they're going to have to cut gas prices way, way down, or they're just not going to sell it because people just aren't going to buy it. And so then people that were making a killing selling gas are not going to be making a killing anymore. It's like what happened with cakes. When you were the only one selling cakes in San Luis Potosí or in Mexico that were decent, then you could charge more. But when everyone starts selling cakes that are decent, now you're not selling a luxury item. You're selling a commodity item.
Right.
And now you're competing on price
and service.
and things like that. But you're not really selling the product anymore. The product is there. It's like buying bread. When you go to buy bread, most people, they're not looking for the best bread. Bread's all the same when you go to the grocery store. They're just going to buy what's easier to grip, the biggest corner of the aisle, the easiest one to get. However, they factor in how they economize on that.
But you take John the farmer, he's got $1 million invested, and now he's no longer able. What's he going to do with that investment? He's out of business because
Could be. No, it's definitely painful. But the option is to maintain John the farmer through subsidies, so that Americans have to buy things they could get at half the price. They have to buy it at twice the price to keep John the farmer producing it half as efficiently.
well. But the ones making those laws are not affected by them because they're not the guy that's got all
That's
this.
true. That's true.
And that's what the center of the country is where this is happening. and the edges are the tech people, and they're not affected by it. And they're the ones making the laws, or trying to, because we're 50-50.
Well, the middle of the country has a tremendous effect on these laws. Iowa caucus matters because of ethanol. King corn is huge, and it decides the Republican nomination many times.
Well, see, the government forces them to put ethanol in gasoline.
Because Iowa will not vote for anyone hardly. When they voted for Ted Cruz in 2016 in the primaries, in the caucuses, that was amazing. That was astounding. Ted Cruz came out against ethanol, and he won the Iowa caucus.
That's pretty amazing.
That is astounding. That was a huge sea change, and I'm very curious to see what happens in 2024 when we have another actual caucus and see what happens. See if
Right.
that shift has changed so much that they are finally willing to lose out on their subsidies. And you realize how much more money we pay for corn and corn products because of ethanol?
Oh, yeah.
It raises the price of corn outrageously high. It's why, if we don't put tariffs on corn from other nations, they'll undersell us.
Yeah, probably so.
So we're paying double tariffs. We're paying tariff on our own stuff. As if we were foreigners.
Yeah.
It's a crazy thing. Anyways, I wanted to go. We're running out of time, but I wanted to get to some of the sermons you've preached
Okay.
in the mission conferences. So, I shouldn't say that. I don't mean it that way. So let me phrase it differently, because I want to put it the way I want it, the way it should be. So I'm a student of preaching in the sense of I study it. I don't mean it. I do it, but I really enjoy listening to it, analyzing it, and whatever.
Right.
And I like to see what people, the responses are. By a long shot, the most positive response that I hear of all the mission conferences and mission conference sermons, by not even close second, are the sermons you've preached in the mission conference. I'm talking about by a long shot, by a wide spectrum of people.
Wow.
If they remember a sermon, it is almost invariably one of three messages. So it's going to be the armor bearer message that you preached, and I think that was in a mission conference, right?
Yep.
And it's going to be the toolbox or the toolkit or the tool. I don't know what you would call it, but the toolbox message, and then the farming message, which is the one I remember the best.
Which one was that?
So I'm the only one to remember it, but since my opinion counts for so much, I weighed the opinion.
I remember the farming messages. I got several.
Well, I'm talking about the one where you talked about holding up the burning bag.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you could drive towards the light because you can't see with the headlights
Right.
through the dirt,
Yeah, okay.
but you can
Yep.
see a light off in the
Yeah.
distance. That
Right.
one.
Yeah.
Those are the three that always get brought up.
Yep.
The armor bearer, the toolbox, and the farming messages.
Okay.
Why don't you
Well, the armor bearer was the one that I preached when we were just going to Mexico, the first mission conference.
that far long ago,
Yes,
38 years ago.
yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, that tells you how impactful of a sermon that is to be remembered
Yeah.
by so many people to this day.
Well, the two principal characters in the Bible that impressed me the most is Jonathan and the armor bearer. Jonathan, because he was willing, knowing that David was selected over Saul, that meaning he's no longer going to be king, helped save David, protected him, gave him his clothes, which I took it as his
Position.
his position, and says, if God's chosen you, then I'm behind you. And then the armor bearer, which also is with Jonathan, and I saw that as my place and the place that most Christians should be in. There's very few that have the Jonathan vision. This is what we should do. I've got the plan, and let's go get it done. There's a few of those, and nearly everybody else don't have that. And where do they stand? Well, they're the distractors, or they're the guy that's the armor bearer that says, "I'm with you to the point of your own heart." He didn't say that he had any conviction for that. He didn't have the plan. He just said, "I'm with you as long as according to your vision, your heart, and I think if we had more of those kind of people that not looking for the glory, not looking to make the
And
the
they
big
understand that they don't maybe have a vision for
splash.
themselves.
I didn't have a vision. I seen when I went to Mexico, I saw some people that had something they wanted to do, and I knew it was worthwhile because of the training I had from the time I was very little. That
You could
spiritual thing.
identify a vision.
Yeah, I knew they had something. They were going to help people. They were going to preach the gospel, the thing that's going to change their lives for eternity. And I didn't have a vision. I didn't have a way how to do it, but I'll go help them. And that's the mission. That's the mission that I've had, and that story explains it. To me, that was the most important. That's the most important thing that I think I've seen in the Bible is that attitude and that. And
And it is a very impactful statement that the armor bearer makes, because at every point that they reach some type of a difficulty, and I think Jonathan even offers whatever to him for him to go back or release him from it's always his response is, as far as you want to go, I'm behind you.
yeah, that's right.
You do what you're going to do, and I'm right behind you.
And he wasn't looking for glory. You don't know his name. He's not looking for glory. He's just, I'm there because I can see you got a vision, you got a calling. And see, Jonathan did the same thing with David. I'm being shoved out. It's not just that I'm, that I'm wanting out. I got pushed out because it wasn't even my sin. It was my father got me shoved out of my rightful place, and God did it. I'm behind you. I'm going to protect you from my own father. I'm going to take my position, and he must have known. He wasn't no dummy. He knows that meant he was going to die early. In order for David to take over, and those two people have impacted my ministry the most, and that's what I tried to express in them. Those.
Mm-hmm. And then you had the toolbox sermon.
Well, the toolbox is most people, or not most, I don't know. A lot of people take the Bible so spiritually they don't see what God's trying to say to us. It's in parables, which are examples, and it's with all kinds of tools. It's all kinds of things that we use in daily life. And so I just started looking to things that I knew how to use that are mentioned in the Bible. The saw, the plumb bob.
That's one of the things that I think sets apart I'll call it your version of this message. 'Cause I've heard a number of people preach a similar message, and not just people that might have heard it from you, but it's not a unheard of right of taking in tools. But what sets it apart, in my opinion, of your version of it, and the ones that I've heard from anyone else, is you actually know how to use the tools. I mean, really know how.
Yeah.
Where you've used them very productively for a very, very long time, the tools you're talking about.
Right.
So it's not like, you read a Wikipedia entry on what a hammer is and how it works. It's like, I've actually worn a hammer out.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I don't think anyone else ever I know can say they've worn a hammer out.
I wore a lot of them out. I wore a lot of them out.
Well, you used to drive. I remember you telling me you used to drive a carton.
Well, I tried to. Every morning I would take a fresh 50-pound box out of the trailer up when I was using just hand nails. We didn't have nail guns.
No nail guns.
We had no nail guns. We drove everything. And we also were so I take a 50-pound box of 3-inch 12D, not 16s. 16s are too long now since they've shortened the wood.
Right.
People don't know that. They all call them 16s, but if you use 16, you got a 1/4 inch of nail sticking out, hurting you.
Right.
Stabbing you. So you use 12Ds, and you want to use sinkers, coated sinkers, and so I'd get 50 pounds of those, and then during the day we was putting on Celotex using roofing nails. We was putting on cornice using 6s or 7s box nails. But that 50-pound box was mine, and I tried to drive that every day. And the hardest job was driving the nails. Carrying the lumber was less strenuous. So the older guys in their 30s, they would carry and set up, and I would drive most of the nails, just to.
So my point is, you've actually really put a lot of time into these tools. So when you talk about them, you're talking about them from a place of a lot of experience.
Yes.
So go ahead.
So, like this hammer, this is the best one to drive a lot of nails, not because it's so balanced, but it's no good in the winter because this metal handle freezes you. And they have the others that are the thin ones. Those have too much vibration, and it'll ruin your elbow. And the wood-handled ones are better in the winter because your hand won't freeze, but they break more often. It's just all kinds of things you learn when you. So I switched hammers depending on what the weather was and was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I wanted to drive a lot of nails, you want this one because if too heavy or too long a handle, they got longer handles, it's too much to bring back up.
Mm-hmm. The recycle time is too
The
long.
recycle's too. So you got to drive you have to drive. Your set has to be at least a ½ inch to an inch deep when you set it. And so
Yeah. Have you ever seen? You have. That's what. See, most people would take the hammer. Tick 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 tick.
No, they grab the nail at the bottom, so they're a long ways away. So when they miss, it never slows down till it hits your thumb and smashes it.
That's the one thing you learn. Show them where you hold it. Look, hold on. He's going to show you how to hold a nail when you're going to drive a nail. Put it up there so you can see it. You see it in the video?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
you hold it right up into the head, and when you're coming down, you match it, and then you hit it. And we used to have competitions to see who could drive it all the way through a 2x4 while holding on to it. and when you do this and you miss, you slide off
Instead of smashing.
instead of missing and smashing down here.
And also, if you hold it up here, like down here at the point,
It wobbles.
It wobbles all over.
So you really get a chance to smash you.
It makes it real challenging. If you hold it up here, see,
You got
you
less
have
movement.
control, and you have in your hands. Your body actually has a mechanism, a phenomena, where in the dark you can touch your fingers. So your hand can find your other hand, right? So you want to put it here where you want the hand to find it, not down here where you don't want it to find it.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so your message on the tools.
Yeah.
You don't just talk about the hammer. You talk about, which tools do you talk about?
The plumb bob is the one that I really like the most.
You've made that like the conclusion, right, of the message?
Yeah, that was the conclusion. The plumb bob is and I always had a brass one, brass of judgment. And a plumb bob only works in gravity. You can't take it to space. It won't help you. But in gravity, and gravity is like our sin, and it's pulling the judgment of God. And the cord is the mercy of God holding it from judgment. It's not God up on a cloud looking to throw judgment at you and destroy you. He's holding back the judgment that has to come against your sin. And that cord is the mercy of the Lord holding it off. And
I also like how you explain the difference between levels and plumb bobs and why plumb bobs are better in so many scenarios.
yeah, well,
They're always better as far as accuracy.
right, yeah, because a level works off of the
It's level in itself.
level in itself. The earth isn't level. It's if you had a long enough level and you had it level, you would have the curve of the earth, and this would be flat on top of it, and it would be further away here on both ends and on the center. I don't know how it works. It don't work right. But the other is gravity pulls it straight down. The problem with the level is any little thing that when you're laying bricks, if you have a set of bricks and one brick sticks out, then that's what it hits. And then the next one sticks out, and then it hits there, and it grows. The first wall I built in Mexico with my level, I was going to teach those
He's going to teach those Mexicans.
I'm going to teach them boys how to. You guys got a string and a toy on the end of it. What's that? A yo-yo? I had my 8-foot level, and I got the wall up about as high as my head using my level, and the bubbles right on every time, and my each brick was sticking out just a little bit, pushing the level till it was leaning. It was off like 3 inches. And, oh, man. I'm over there with a sledgehammer driving the thing back, the wall back, I had to take a saw and cut it off. I'm learning.
Maybe those guys with a plumb bob aren't so
Yeah,
dumb
they
after
were
all.
pretty sharp. I wasn't. And no, you return to the same one every time because of the string being so much smaller than the size of the plumb bob. Your plumb bob's working off of the first brick you laid, and if one's out a little bit, you bypass it.
Yeah, I always like that application in the message where you're saying how the scriptures bring us back to the same point
Every time.
and we're leveling off of that same point. And if somebody's plumbing, sorry, off that same point every time, and if somebody is pushed extreme left or extreme right a little bit in the wall, so we can go back in church history and find people that are pushed in and out of, let's say, as bricks in the wall. But if we go back through the scriptures and come back to the apostles,
right,
and plumb off, then we can get back to,
because everybody's got a different
leaning.
They got, this is something that's just mine. This is something I really understand. My focus is this, and they get out of balance. And they're like the saw that's sharpened on one side.
Well, that's another good one. You talk about the saw, whether it be a circular saw, but you use a hand saw. A
circular saw does the same thing.
Well, so what people don't know, and for those that don't know the message, so what people who don't use the tools don't realize is hand saws often don't cut straight. Yeah. If you have a hand saw at home, nowadays, it probably isn't going to cut straight. It'd be very likely to cut at a slant. Right. And most people don't have any idea why their hacksaw or handsaw.
They think it's because it's not sharp.
Right.
But it could be sharp.
It could be real sharp and cut crooked then.
Right, because one side is sharper than the other. And so you go...
Because the teeth, explain...
No, go ahead.
No, you...
The teeth are made this way, and this is sharpened to cut this side of the wood, and this is sharpened to cut the other side of your track. And if this one is not as sharp, it's going to not cut. And so the sharp end cuts, and then it goes. And so hacksaws are the worst of all of them. They get a little bit dull on one side.
Or you chip a tooth on the side.
Chip a tooth, and then it goes... And so you fight it, and it's not going to...
I like how you say on the message that you're better off with a dull blade that's equal on both sides than a sharp blade that's unequal.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, you can actually cut straight. It may work you to death, but...
Remember in the men's retreat, this one, we had a tool contest. I don't know if I ever told you about that.
No.
Well, we had one of the activities we did at one of our men's retreat is we had a thing with a race. So we had 2 hammers, 2 saws, 2
working with bolts and nuts.
Wrenches, had a pile of wrenches. You had to find the right wrenches to get the nuts and the bolt off stuff. And,
okay.
And
sounds fun.
Yeah, you're racing through it. And we had one saw. I just grabbed 2 hand saws I have. I have a couple hand saws. And one of them was sharp. The other one, you're better off using it like an axe.
Beautiful.
It's just horrible. So and they're all together, so you want to get to the saws first because they were a killer. A killer.
You should have grabbed the sharp one and go cut some steel. And
made them both dull. Oh, well, the sharp one wasn't that sharp. It was relatively sharp.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So anyways, you have the saw, and it needs to be equally sharp.
Yeah, so that'll cut straight. And that's what Christians do. They get on their thing, and they just everything else is left behind. And it gets to the point where you think somebody's not even a Christian because they're not focused on your thing. And we need to be balanced. And the balance is, as the plumb bob says, you come down to the foundation always, and not base yourself on this charismatic preacher that convinces you on something. He may have a very good point and something you need to really work on, but the next guy that you don't, he may be coming off the God Scripture, and you need to analyze these things of where am I getting my foundation from? Is it? And that's what happened to me with the local church. They begin to take their leader as the Word of God, and I just couldn't go that route. I've got to. If you're telling me not to study the Scriptures and confirm what you're saying, you're telling me just to follow the flow, I couldn't do that. And that's why we left the local church.
And then what are the other tools you have in that message?
The file.
Right.
It says that a brother with steel.
Sharpening iron sharpening iron.
The file, and that we should not fight we should appreciate the criticism we get from our brothers. They're probably the only ones that really care how you end up eternally. And you should cherish people that'll tell you where you're wrong. And that's being rubbed on the wrong way like a file, and it's going to take off. We used to call it the church grinder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the church grinder. I come to take off your sharp points. You're kind of abrasive and you're offensive, and so I am. So we're going to rub each other and try to smooth this up so we can get along. And I always tell people that are having trouble in between preachers in Mexico, go with the guy that that most bothers you, and both of you concentrate on winning souls for an hour. And these other problems that are being problems to you will dissipate if you can find a common goal and work at it. And so, yeah. And of course, there's always the ruler.
Yes.
And always had a piece of elastic, and I could make anything fit.
Yeah, he had a strip of elastic, and he drew the inch marks on it. But then he's just like, see, everything fits.
Yeah.
That's the normal interpretation of the Bible.
Or you don't fit.
Or you're never tall enough.
Yeah, you're
I'm
never
always
good
just
enough.
Right.
Yeah, I could eliminate your abilities, and I could make mine perfect. And it's a
Yeah. I remember that message just real well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have Leighton that would always ask you when he was real small about your orange hammer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because I use that little plastic orange hammer at work.
Yeah, and I come I was into stalls with this thing hanging on. I was scratching everything and beating it up.
He comes to work to do white toilet partitions, baked enamel toilet partitions with that thing hanging off of him. You might as well be walking in with a coat of armor with spikes sticking out. Here, I'll scratch it all up.
Yeah,
he's laughing at me because I got that little rubber hammer.
You come over and took it away from me.
Gave him a little one. He's like,
what this twinky little thing for? Well, all you're doing is you need the right tool.
Yeah, and you're also hitting soft tile.
Yeah.
You take that and try to drive an anchor in, and you miss.
Yeah.
You're gonna smack the tile and chip it.
And one of the many things you can learn from that is that everybody's got a different gift. You wouldn't take that little hammer and go build a house, but you sure shouldn't have it inside fixing this little thing and messing it up and scratching like I was doing. And then you need to appreciate each other. You know, if you got some bruiser and all he can do is drive stakes, you don't put him to do some fine little work, but boy, when it's time to drive stakes, he's a guy you need to appreciate him. And so many times we belittle other people's gifts and their abilities.
Yes.
And it takes the whole toolbox. It takes all these arrangements, and I probably got 20, 30, maybe 30 different types of hammers for shingles and for sheetrock and they just got a hammer for everything. Claw hammers and curved claws and.
There's no place for a curve.
There's no place for a curved claw.
Yes, there is. You guys. I keep one just so I can pull nails. It's a better nail puller.
It is a better
reason Marco shows up.
When you make a mistake driving your
Marco's
nail,
never
I
gonna
gotta pull it. I get my curved claw hammer.
Marco's never gonna let us live it down. Marco's always buying a curved claw hammer, little girl hammer.
Here to go, Marco. At least you can pull the nails when they make a mistake. That's what that's for.
See, we have crowbars that are ratchet. By far the best ones.
Yeah, no, that's a good nail puller right there.
That's a good nail puller.
Yeah, well, you're not supposed to make mistakes, so don't worry about it.
Oh, I haven't ever used a claw. Claws? What are claws? I thought you just bent them over.
Well, these have been sharpened too, but I sharpen them so I can stab something and pick it up. And,
Yes.
And when we do wind bracing, you have to notch the 2x4, and then you chip out the just that down in.
So Nolan, here we go. Here's a test of your tool knowledge.
All right.
Why are hammer heads curved?
There you go.
Hammer heads, if you look at a new hammer, it's curved. They're never flat or hardly ever flat. Why is that?
So if you hit your finger, you don't cut it off.
When you finish this, I'll tell him about another curve I did.
Tell him why it's curved.
If it's flat, you have to hit it there. If it's curved, if this one here is too flat, I've sharpened it, got it too flat. If it's curved, you're always hitting it straight on so it'll drive because it's curved. But I took and I concaved it on a big hammer I had so that the nail would slide to the center. And that worked great until one day I come down and I just tore the skin right off my. Because
of course he sharpened the outside edge. Yeah.
Tore the skin right off because it was. But that concave worked pretty good. It would slide to the center.
And when you're driving 50 pounds of big nails a day, you know the difference in all these little things. You can tell right away.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just feel the difference in everything. I assume. I've never driven 5 nails in a day, so I wouldn't know.
At that time, I used an S-wing, and it has a hole all the way through. This doesn't. So I wanted to use that because that many nails, you'll have so much vibration, you won't feel your arm at night. And so with a nail through it, when I went down, as soon as I hit,
you would poke a nail right through the hammer.
So I wouldn't lose it, and I completely release that. And I get it lined up and let loose of the hammer so that the vibration wouldn't run up my arm. We had several guys that had to have elbows, had surgery and everything using that hammer.
Those S-wings.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know because I don't know what we use them for.
And that handle's dangerous. You hit your finger, overswing and hit your finger there, that thing's sharp. It'd cut your finger off.
Yeah. But a lot of people use it as an axe, the handle.
Yeah.
I've seen them use it, hack stuff up with it.
I broke one. I broke a S-wing.
Oh, really?
I would beat nails with, and it was hard wood. It was yellow pine. It was structural trusses, and I was nailing them on. And I'm putting it down, and I was power stroking them, and all of a sudden I'm swinging this handle. I was afraid I hit somebody. It broke it right off and went flying.
Wow. And then the other message was the farming message.
Right. My dad was planting at night. He'd working in the shop, and during the day, and so at night we do the planting. And once you got the dust rolling and the headlights on it were like 2 candle power in that old day, and all you could see was the reflection of your blind, just like you're in the fog.
And brighter headlights wouldn't necessarily help much more.
It's just more blinding. It was dusty, and that dust in the air, you couldn't see anything. So, and we were using fertilizer that came in paper bags with plastic inner linings, and so we'd take a whole bunch on both ends. My sister was down there. We'd roll them up, and as soon as we could hear the tractor. We couldn't see it because he's got his lights turned off. Well, we could hear the planter lifting. You'd light your bag and you'd stand at the mark. The planter makes a mark where you return, and you stand at that and hold your bag up. And on fire. And
a paper bag covered in plastic with fertilizer in it. And what could go wrong?
And the plastic running down your arm. You could. Yeah, pretty much. And so when he turned around, and I'd light mine, and then we'd go to midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning doing that. You could tell when he started planting by what we called torch planting. You could tell because it was straighter.
He could plant straighter in the dark than he could in the daytime.
In the dark, because...
And the application of that is because of why?
Because your own light, your own understanding is just like looking in the fog. It reflects back, and you think you got all this light and you're smart, but you can't see past the end of the tractor. And with that bag, you can see that for a mile and drive straight to it. You're not distracted. When you're planting in the daytime and you've got your mark, you're looking to see what car's passing by and seeing if there's any animals or, you're just distracted. At night, there was no distraction. You couldn't see anything but that light, and you just drive into it. And them were like the rows today that are planted with GPS. It just made all the difference.
The original GPS.
The original GPS. And in our lives, we think that our wisdom is good enough, and it isn't. It takes us off the we're distracted and everything else, and if we keep our eyes on the Word of God, not on somebody's all these explanations come in. We need to prove them, be our own research, be our own understanding, and that's just like, and you go toward what the Lord has given us instead of trusting in ourselves.
That was fantastic. We'll stop with there because that was a great podcast, and I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I'm glad you had me come in. It was great.
Well, I appreciate all the years of an example you've been to me, and your faithfulness, your hard work. Do you remember a young man, Juan Carlos, from San Luis Potosí? Do you remember Juan Carlos?
Sure.
He's now living here in the States. Been living here for a long time.
Really?
Yes, I'm actually going to have him on the podcast virtually here in a little while. Anyways, he messaged in. Let me get it here. Sorry. He messaged in when you first started talking, and he said, "God is my witness. I learned to work hard from seeing your dad and from his advice telling me to work hard, hard, hard."
I only said it 3 times?
Yeah, only 3 times. He said it the rest of the times to me. No, he's about to start full-time ministry.
Praise the Lord.
In North Carolina, I think is where he's at. He's married, has beautiful family, and he worked at Advanced Auto Parts for like 20 years and retired, and he's about to go into full-time ministry.
Praise the Lord. Yeah, I remember Juan Carlos well.
Yeah. So anyways, he messaged him.
Well,
but yes, you've been a tremendous example to me, to my children, to the churches on work and on working. No one can look at your life and say that you can't work full-time and have a ministry.
Well,
you've made that very clear, and you've done it for many, many years. So I appreciate that very much, and that's why I appreciate you coming and talking to me about it in the podcast.
Thank you.
And we will be here next week with Missy Angulo. Will be here with us next week, Saturday at 9 a.m. We're going to talk about Missy. She's a missionary brat. No longer a missionary, but still a brat. And we're going to be talking to her about that. Definitely got some questions about how that happened. But Missy will be in. Love Missy. She's a serial hugger. And we definitely are going to explore what's up with that business. So have a great day. See you next Saturday. Thank you.